Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, James Franklin is no longer at Penn State, and I am like a dog chasing a truck. I don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, it's so funny, man, because he's the, I guess, funniest coach out there. Like, it's almost getting sad with Dabo, I feel. So James Franklin was like the guy that was fun to bully. And it's like, who are we going to bully now? We'll find someone. Do you have any opening candidates for who we'll bully now?
You're right, Dabo's the obvious one, but I bring up these James Franklin stats on a weekly basis, and now they just go into a void. How am I going to bring up the fact that he was 4-21 against AP top 10 teams? What are we going to do with this? I can't bring up the fact that he's got 2 wins against AP top 10 teams after the 2016 season. Like, what am I? I was honestly stunned when this came out. Of course, it came out 5 minutes after we recorded on Sunday, so that's why we're discussing it.
He was still standing
today.
in the stadium looking at the crowd, waiting for us to finish recording.
Yes, they were. Thank you, Pat Kraft, for doing just that. But it's kind of set the college football world into a bit of a frenzy. And all of a sudden, when you realize that Penn State is willing to fork over upwards of $50 million, albeit with offset language in the contract, which is really, really important. And Penn State, based on the reporting that's come out, I think is going to end up being on the hook potentially for like $18 million. James Franklin apparently has to take a job either in coaching or media, or at least has to put a good fourth effort, which that guy could show up to ESPN in his underwear and they would hire him to be an analyst. So, yeah, he's going to be just fine. James Franklin will find work.
Hold on, you said he has to have a good faith effort to get employed? Like, he can't just, like, sit around in his mom's basement, like, eat pizza. Like, he has to go get on Indeed.com or whatever. And, hey, young man, how many resumes have you put out? You want this buyout?
That I'll give Penn State credit for that, because it taps into a coach's ego. And I know we've talked a lot about the interesting structure of the Sam Pittman incentive-based buyout of you have to win 70. If you win, more than 500, winning percentage, then you get X amount of dollars. If you're below it, then you get this. And more athletic directors at big time programs need to say offset money needs to be part of this, because James Franklin wants to work. He wants to work. He's got too big of an ego not to. And everybody, if you like, no matter who you talk to, they're telling you he wants to get back into it. If I were James Franklin, I would take a job in media. I would 100% go the Dan Mullen route with all of this and just reset and go across the country, talking to other coaches, getting intel on what didn't work. Because if a school is spending that much money for you to go away, you have issues that you need to figure out. And James Franklin, whether or not he wants to admit it or not, has issues he needs to figure out. I think that that'd be a wise choice. Do I think he ends up doing that? No way.
Yeah, and shout out Dan Mullen, who's become probably the hottest or one of the hottest outside of Signetti naming this coaching search. It just goes to show.
Said he's staying too at UNLV.
He sure did. That's
said
the other
right
part
now.
Of it.
We'll see.
Yeah, and of course, like, they were like, some Mississippi State fans rolled their eyes hearing that, right? Which, like, yeah, I've heard that before. But that being said, it just goes to show, like, number one, your story is never over. And I'll close out on this. It would be the funniest thing ever for James Franklin to just go complete date Mike and, like, be a personality and be like, these guys need to take more chances. These guys need to throw it deep.
Right.
These guys, it'd just be like the most aggressive couch watcher of football. It'd be just like us, like, just be saying dumb stuff. That would be so fun for him. I'm rooting for him to just be a dumb football guy.
That would be me finding my purpose again. Would be criticizing James Franklin's criticism. That's how this ends up. That'd be great.
Call Nick Saban a fraud on air. Let's do it, man. Get on there with Pat McAfee, go shirtless. Let's go.
James Franklin criticizing someone's fourth down calls, even though he just insisted on taking the ball out of Trace McSorley's hand repeatedly during that 2018 season when Penn State should have been so much better. I'd be here for absolutely all of it. But will Penn State have a big name hire like Matt Rule, who has lost 18 consecutive games to AP Top 25 competition? Please, that would be my new passion, would just be pointing out all the Matt Rule stats in the world. That's where I think my angst has transitioned to. It really has.
We've gotten there. We've gotten to this point in the season. We're in mid-season 4 where I heard that stat that here comes Matt Rule. I know Matt Rule is next. We're about to come for you too, buddy, because you're right. That's like, hey, I'm getting sick of McDonald's. I'm going to go eat Burger King. It's like, how do you go from James Franklin to Matt Rule? It's just a new guy in the same packaging.
The only thing maybe dumber than Penn State hiring Matt Rule and paying an absurd amount of money to do so would be Nebraska giving him a raise and an extension when that guy is set to make $12.5 million in 2030. $12.5 million for a guy that has not beat an AP top 25 team that is from a power conference school, like ever.
Last Nebraska QB to beat a ranked team was like Scott Frost. They haven't seen a ranked win since like the Bush administration. But yeah, I mean, hey,
Tommy Armstrong is the last Nebraska quarterback to beat a ranked team. 2016, when they beat Oregon. They've lost 28 consecutive games to AP top 25 teams.
That's a funnier name than the one I made up. Okay. Anyway, but again, college football loss today. I'll put a on it here because at least after a big loss, if you look at your coach's record, you could say at least I don't have James Franklin. Now you can't say that because nobody has James Franklin.
Arkansas, I don't think we'll have James Franklin. I don't think that would line up.
I'd rather have Bobby P because it's fun.
Yeah. I'd have fun with James Franklin too. I would. I definitely would. We have a loaded slate. The most loaded slate, literally, because there are no buys in the SEC. We have good on good, SEC on SEC, 8 games to get to, all of which are in conference play. We have a great pod coming up, so we're going to talk about all these different midseason storylines that we've got going on with Jesse Simonton, coaching things, Heisman things. We get into all of it. But first, before we get to everything, word from our friends at Dabble. You guys know I've been talking about Dabble for a really, really long time. It is one of the newest and best apps in the DFS space. They've wasted no time making a name for themselves. The social function is second to none. They offer a wide variety of sports for making picks, including college football, NFL. We've got NBA starting up. NHL is already happening. Shout out Ben McDonald. If you know, you know. Use promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that is promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. Will, we're starting at the place that I think will cause you a lot of anxiety and a lot of sweat. Number 10 LSU on the road. Number 17 Vandy, who is a 2.5 point favorite. The over-under I have is 0.5 deep right completions for Garrett Nussmeier.
Why would you do this?
Will.
Why would you start off with this? We were making fun of James Franklin. We were having so much fun. This is just specifically hurtful stat. What is that, Connor?
The hurtful stat is that this season, Garrett Nussmeier is 0 for 9 on passes to the deep right side of the field, which is 20 yards beyond the line of scrimmage to outside of the numbers on the right side, albeit with one drop. He had when did that drop come? Does the Barrion Brown play count as a drop?
This is unbelievable.
That's not the drop.
This is unbelievable.
I hope that's not the drop. The Clemson play wherein he definitely caught the football and they ruled it. That can't be it. If that's it, I want to disavow.
It does fit the narrative there, doesn't it?
A little bit. Last year, though, he had 10 completions for 351 yards to that area of the field. It is very well documented on this show, on every show that talks about LSU football, where Garrett Nussmeier is throwing the football and what it looks like. The ab strain that he dealt with in the first part of the year is apparently better. Nuss said he was dealing with a minor ankle injury against South Carolina. It felt pretty significant during a lot of those moments. And when he's limping off the field, like pretty much every single time LSU is forced off the field, let's just say it's something worth monitoring.
And during his rushing attempts that he had, his scrambles just...
the scramble's good.
Yeah.
The scramble's good.
Well, he got yards. It didn't look particularly... Like, if South Carolina wanted to stop him, I feel like it could have gone poorly.
He got to the edge and turned up field in ways that Garrett Nussmeier, even when he's been fully healthy, has not always been willing to do. I think he had 9 scrambles last year.
Connor, what is faster, you with a lawnmower or him right now?
Self-propelled?
Yes.
Self-propelled me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get up and down. My front yard is a good size for a front yard lawn, not to brag. But I can usually knock that out in like 25 minutes if I'm pushing it. If I've got somewhere that I need to be and I'm like, gotta give the front a quick mow. It's Florida this time of year, grows quickly. I can do 25. And I think that's probably, I don't know what the metrics are on Garrett Nussmeier's top speed. If we've gotten those numbers yet, it can't be 17 miles an hour the way that I'm moving.
That's a fact right there. Dual threat.
Yeah. It is, it's going to be worth watching until it's not. Like, that's where we're at with all this. I think Garrett Nussmeier could very much use a healthy Aaron Anderson, TBD on that. Hopefully he's making progress. He was warming up last week, even though it was pretty much decided that he wasn't going to play in that game. So take that for what it is. Vandy's defense forced Ty Simpson into some really tough spots, I thought, in that game where he looked confused. And that's somebody that we're talking about playing at a higher level than anyone right now. I think they're plenty capable of doing that to Nussmeier in Nashville. I buried the lead here, Will. Vandy's favored against the top 10 team.
Yeah.
I mean, that is absurd. And this is how absurd this is. Cole Kublik tweeted this out. 77 times that Vandy has been in a game against a top 10 team since 1978, and this is the first time they are favored, which means Vandy is favored against a top 10 team for the first time since when, Will?
The Jimmy Carter administration.
It always comes back to Jimmy, RIP. That's telling. That is really, really telling. And, Will, I've gone back and forth on this. I don't know if you have too, but on one hand, I sort of feel like it's everything for LSU's playoff chances. How could they not show up desperate on the road? On the other hand, betting against Diego Pavia feels like something that nobody wants to do anymore, which is what the odds makers are telling you. They're accounting for that with that line. And I can't believe I'm doing this. I really cannot believe I'm doing this, but I feel like I have to. I don't have faith in this LSU offense. And as much as I love the LSU defense, I could very much see them chasing around Diego Pavia and making him look like what Lenore Sellers did last week, a stat that we're going to get to in a bit here. I do think Tim Beck can dial up a couple of those chunk plays, and I think that could be the difference in this one. I'm picking Vandy to beat LSU 21-14.
Yeah, that's a fine enough bet. I mean, if you look at kind of what both teams have put on paper or on tape this year, Vandy's clearly been the better team. I mean, I really don't think that there's really too much debate about that. I've been having to kind of explain this to LSU fans. It's like, don't look at the logo on the side of the helmet. If these two teams' resumes were flipped, Vandy would be higher ranked than LSU. You know what I'm saying? Like, if they had an LSU logo on their helmet. And that being said, like, you can look at the South Carolina one where Vandy went to South Carolina and LSU hosted them. LSU kind of, quote unquote, played with their food. But I would argue when you turn the ball over inside the 2-yard line, that's your fault. It's not like you were bored. You shouldn't have done that. I would honestly look at the Bama game for something to feel good about Vandy. I think that if this LSU team had played in Bryant-Denny Stadium on that weekend, they would have lost probably worse than they did last year, given what LSU has struggled at, what Alabama has succeeded at. Now, I say all that to say, though, if you look at what the Alabama defense has struggled at, it's kind of the opposite of the LSU defense, right? Like a mobile quarterback like Diego Pavia, we saw how much they were able to give Lenore Sellers fits. I think there was a stat. It was like Lenore ran like an absurd amount of yards, like 600.
We're going to get that is the over-under that is coming up in just a second here. So we will get to that in just a second.
Well, spoiler alert, Lenore Sellers ran sideways a lot, okay?
Yes.
And I think that Diego Pavia's particular style of football is not very conducive to the style of defense that LSU plays, just because they can tackle you one-on-one, like we saw with Sellers. With Vandy, with Pavia, it is just more of the want to tackle him over and over again. He's like a battering ram, whereas I think that Sellers can be a little bit slipperier. Like Pavia on every play is daring you to take the hit, and I think that Whit Weeks will be full of coffee and barfing all over him, and I'm not too worried about that. I'm waiting for Pavia to lower his shoulder on Weeks and him to just, again, pocket sand, eject the coffee on Pavia. But that being said, like, I really do like LSU on that side of the ball in this specific game. But that being said, man, I really do like this Vandy defense, and like we've kind of talked about all year, I think that's what people have been sleeping on. I'm going to go ahead and pick Vandy in this one, man. And I'll tell you why, too. It's not about – this is, again, what I've been trying to explain to LSU fans. It's not that Vandy has a great home field advantage, okay? No one's saying that nobody goes into Nashville, right? It's more about that LSU has needed home fans to beat two sorry SEC offenses 20-10, right? So, like, without those fans, with the added element of confusion that we talked about this, like, with Bama, where I talked about they're always in phase and they're always following their game plan. At home, Garrett Nussmeier is calling panic timeouts and turning the ball over at the 1-yard line. So I think taking away the home field element, I think Vandy wins this one close, and it's off of a couple of those weird LSU turnovers. Now, if they avoid those turnovers, I think LSU could have an easier day, but I haven't seen that they can do that. It's all about the turnovers from Nussmeier and the faces of Joe Sloan and Brian Kelly, who would rather, it seems, be expressive than fix things.
Vandy lost 3 home games last year, 2 of which were to playoff teams, Texas, Tennessee, one of which South Carolina, a team that many felt could have been in the college football playoff. The upside for LSU is that if you win this game by any means, this is not a style points game for LSU in the way that I think even last week we were looking for style points from LSU just because there were so many things. Got style yards, definitely got style yards, but I do think that we were looking at that performance coming off the bye, thinking how crisp is this offense going to be? Are we going to see this offense actually get healthier? Are they going to rely on the run a little bit more? And this is not one of those games. This has turned into a game that LSU can win in a street fight, and it's okay to feel better about this LSU team because of what Vandy has shown us in the first part of the year, because of how effective they have been offensively with a group that I think still has people kind of trying to figure out who exactly they are. And to be fair, last time we saw Vandy, I think even Vandy is trying to figure out a little bit who they are, because for them to only run the ball 19 times in that Alabama game was stunning. And I know that that's been, very well documented, but I think in a game like this, it will come down to those chunk plays. I trust Vandy to get them. I don't trust LSU to get them. And it's kind of as simple as that. It could feel very even for the rest of it, but that's where we're at right now. What a stunning thing to go tell us in August, Will, that we would both think that Vandy is not only going to beat but cover against a top 10 LSU team.
Yeah, I mean, and really it says a ton about Vandy. Like we said, and what stinks is if LSU has a close loss or a hard-fought win against Vandy, I think people have just decided they're Vandy. And I really, like I said, we're Vandy respecters. We followed Pavi. It's so hard for me to understand why people don't see what happened last year, because they had the big flashy win against Alabama and still go, yeah, this team is like barely inside the top 20. And it's like, no, like, again, this has been a better football team. It would be an upset. Yeah. According to Las Vegas, if LSU beats them. But either way, unless LSU wins going away, the positives will be on Vandy's side, right?
We get to say on Sunday, if LSU wins this game, LSU pulls off an upset against Vandy, which would just be such a funny sentence to say.
2-0 against Diego Pavia. Who can say that?
This is true. Be a nice feather in Brian Kelly's cap. You want to fire that guy? He's 2-0 against Vandy, man.
DeBoer can't say that. Anyway.
Exactly. All right. Number 14, Oklahoma, 5.5-point favorites against South Carolina. The over-under, Will, we've already teased it. 894 yards traveled for Lenora Sellers. Connor, that's a very high number. Where did you get that? Cole Kubelik. We're just going to bring up all of Cole's tweets on this pod today. That's what we're going to do. He tweeted this data via Teamworks. Last week at LSU, Lenora Sellers had 19 rushing attempts for 22 yards, yet he covered 894 yards in this game.
I tried to remember that stat, and 600 felt ridiculous. And it's almost 1,000 yards. It's 900 yards. I mean, it's 1,000 yards. Imagine how tired and hurt he was after that game.
It's one of the most ridiculous stats I've ever heard and instantly believed.
Your eyes told the story, right? Because again, it took 5, 6, 7 defenders, like we talked about. LSU had 5, 6, 7 defenders all night. He must have broken 20 tackles technically. Guys got hands on him. I don't know what exactly gets counted as a broken tackle. Sometimes that's a little bit murky. But guys that got hands on him, I feel like 30, 40 times,
Now I'm going to, in a minute here, I'll look up the missed tackles force for Lenora Sellers in that game. I don't know if that counts how many he broke in the backfield as well. But if you watch him at this point, he's in survival mode. He's just in survival mode with teams that can get after the quarterback. And it's worth noting, by the way, Beamer fired his O-line coach. He promoted friend of the show, Sean Elliott, to be able to help with that. It just can't be worse. It's been a disaster this year. South Carolina just does not have an offensive line, and it feels very much like a couple of years ago in pre-draft Rattler, where God, you're just begging for him to take a ridiculous sack, and he needs to still be Superman. They are going to need all the help in the world on that offensive front, and not just home cooking, but like real actual protection, because Oklahoma is coming off a week in which it heard about how much it struggled against Texas. Even though, and I don't even think we brought up this stat in the recap pod, but Oklahoma had 12 TFLs against Texas. And all we were talking about was Texas offensive line found its identity. Now, they only had 1 sack, but they were getting in the backfield. They were blowing up plays. And that is still a unit that can pressure the quarterback. Taylor Wine has really stepped up alongside R. Mason Thomas. So it's not just him. And this just cannot be, if you're South Carolina, another game in which Lenore Sellers is running for his life. It's as simple as that. He can make great plays out of those situations as well as anybody in college football. But if that is your basic offense, which it has felt like far too often, your upside's limited. It's not difficult. It's hard to imagine
really
them
quick
doing anything
before you hop off that. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to share another stat with you. It's the highest pressure rate without blitzing FBS defenses in Week 7. I don't know if you saw this one.
Where's this stat from?
This is from Cam Miller. who's like one of the
PFF, right?
guys, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so just to give you a range, right? The number 2 team had a 52% pressure rate, okay, and the number 10 team in America had a 43% pressure rate without blitzing. LSU had a 72% pressure rate on Ladora Sellers without blitzing last week. Says a lot about LSU for sure. Says a lot about that offensive line, especially with Oklahoma, who has a front about as good as LSU's. Oof.
I'm sure that Shane Beamer, he could just pull up that tweet and say, "Look, you're fired, and here's why."
That's
This
it.
is, I hate to say it, but this is pretty damning at this point. And well, you're right, because this Oklahoma defense front, it is really, really good. It's an important game for Oklahoma because I tend to think teams who lose consecutive games are cooked for the playoff. It's just if you can't get up off the mat, it's really difficult, even in the expanded playoff, to be able to pull off a feat like that without necessarily, especially knowing that both losses would be in conference play. If you can't win a road game against a South Carolina team that has, I would say, pretty clear and obvious weaknesses, I think even Shane Beamer would admit clear and obvious weaknesses, then you don't deserve to make the playoff. That it's as simple as that. First SEC road game of the year for Oklahoma. First SEC road game of John Mateer's career. How healthy does he look? The four-fingered quarterback, 4.5. Dylan Stewart can make this feel like Texas all over again. He can. OU has to be able to run the football, and not just with Mateer, not just with him making plays when things break down, or even just the design runs for him. Venables was asked about the mysterious lack of Jade Knott touches in the first half of the season, and he basically turned it into an answer about how much he loves Torrey Blaylock, the freshman running back.
Next
We've mentioned
question.
him a lot.
Why? What have you seen out of this run game that makes you love anyone? I'd be in this situationship with everyone if that were my run game.
I think he's looked best. I think he's looked best of the backfield options. Now, again, when we've seen so little of Jade Knott, that's really hard to say. So I don't even feel good saying that. But if what they're seeing in practice tells you one story, then we sort of just have to default to that a little bit too much. They need to rely on Torrey Blaylock more. They just do. Even if it's not yielding chunk plays, you have to be willing to attack this South Carolina defense that way, because we've seen them struggle against the run. And we just saw last week with Texas, even if you're getting these negative plays in the first half, or you feel like, man, you really can't do anything in the ground game, sometimes you break that one big one, and then all of a sudden it opens up everything else. And Oklahoma has not been willing to do that this year. And I think it's what's kind of limited their offense at times, which has had great moments, but so many of them have been because of the arm or the legs of John Mateer. They need those non-Mateer moments in this game from an offensive standpoint to feel good moving forward, and to do so against this South Carolina defense in what should be a hostile atmosphere. Well, I think OU bounces back on the road. I won't take them to cover, but I will take them to win a 24-20 game.
I think this game actually comes at a perfect time for both of these teams because their strengths and weaknesses can be seen as similar, right? Obviously, Oklahoma is a better team. I'm not saying it like that, but they're both teams that have really needed their quarterback in the run game. They've been unable to get their running backs going. And while the South Carolina's defense has not been as advertised in the way that Oklahoma has, talking about Dylan Stewart is like definitely a hump to overcome. So I think both teams will get a good rep out of this game and a win. I think they'll both be able to kind of look at themselves and say, hey, we learned something today. I think it's a dream for South Carolina that this game is at home, right? And so I think that being said, because if this was at Oklahoma, I mean, it would probably be rough, right? But I think that
But it wasn't last year. South Carolina dominated this game last year, albeit with a very, very different Oklahoma offense. And it was a game that basically gutted Oklahoma. It was the final straw for Oklahoma's offensive staff. And it was like, oh my God, how are we down 21-0 before we've even sat in our seats?
Well, and actually, that's a great point to bring up here because that brought in, them taking a chance on Mateer and Arbuckle, who, again, haven't looked great. There have been some flashes, but it hasn't been consistent. So this is a really good litmus test for, unfortunately, right? People think this way. The logos are the same, so the teams might be completely different, but you might think, hey, we hired all these guys for what? So I think this would be a chance for Arbuckle to feel comfortable against a South Carolina defense that isn't what is advertised. And like I said, I just think this is a dream. Look, both of these teams can look at their schedule and go, okay, thank goodness this team can't ground and pound us the way that, Texas did, or even like LSU did last week, right? Where it's like, we are going to be able to play our game. This team doesn't inherently take away anything we do. I think that Sellers, at least, I mean, he's got to go into coach's office and be like, brother, I mean, can we get like some option looks? Can we get some like something that's not me? So yeah, but again, from both sides, you have Mason Thomas, you have Dylan Stewart. So I think it's like a little. These teams aren't exactly elite, right? We saw it last week with Oklahoma, and Oklahoma still could be. But I say that to say I still like Oklahoma. I think this will be a tougher game than people expect. But I think that. Again, I'm not trying to give away like whatever, like pats on the back or whatever. I think South Carolina has a chance here. I'm not going to be disappointed if they lose this game, but I think that with the talent they have and with the weaknesses Oklahoma showed last week, a good defensive game plan, which we haven't really seen this year from them, could limit Oklahoma enough for a win. And I think it's very possible for South Carolina.
I was laughing before because I looked up the Lenore Sellers missed tackles force numbers on PFF.
Oh gosh,
and just take and I'll give you a little bit of context.
Okay.
Here. So last year against Clemson, he had 15 in that game, and it was, oh my God. I can't believe a quarterback had 15 missed. Like there are running backs, plenty of running backs in the SEC that have not forced 15 missed tackles. I don't think Caden Durham has forced 15 missed tackles on the year, and Lenore Sellers did that in one game as a quarterback, which is just insane.
I'll be safe and say 20.
No, okay, 20 is that's
too much.
20 is much.
Okay,
that 20 is too much.
So then let's go with 15 again.
12.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't know what point it becomes a tackle attempt, because I could tell you, there were 4, 5, 6 guys who had an angle on him and he just put a move on him and they didn't even get there. So audibly I could count 30 guys that could have and should have tackled him. So yeah, I mean, 12 as a statistical, this guy was wrapping you up and you got out of it for a quarterback is nuts.
Yeah. I can't imagine watching that defensive film last week and seeing some of the angles that these guys took, where they probably 98% of the time in their careers, if they have taken that angle or have had that type of advantage in the backfield, they have at least forced a sack, half a sack, something, and instead watched a quarterback escape out of it and either throw it away or gain 2 yards somehow. Like Lenore Sellers' 2-yard gains are some of the best in the history of college football. They just
it's very possible that Blake Baker had like a screaming session of this game. Now that I think about it, even though they limited that offense, because to your point, like a lot of guys, like these are like all SEC caliber linebackers that are quote unquote missing tackles. It just goes to show, like, again, how deep LSU was and how lost South Carolina's offense was, because you just can't. Again, Oklahoma has just as talented guys. You just can't bank on that happening.
Yeah, and Arch made some really nice throws on the move last week when Oklahoma wasn't able to really get home, and they only ended up sacking him once. So that's got to be a huge point of emphasis in those defensive meetings this week, and knowing just how difficult of a task it is to take down Lenore Sellers, even with a single-ply offensive line, if we can even call it that at this point. So,
Connor, does Oklahoma get a turnover this week?
Against a non-Kent State team? I'm going to say yes. I
think so. It's coming. I think that could be a big part of the difference in this one too.
Yeah, definitely good. By the way, this is too good of a game to be at 12:45. This is, if I'm not mistaken, this is a 12:45 start.
It is.
On
I was
SEC
looking at
Network.
it. Yeah, it is.
That is a spot that is reserved for Tennessee hosting East Tennessee. That is not a spot reserved for. That just shows you how good this slate is this week. That game is at 12:45. I had to look at this like 3 different times. I get why they do that as part of the ESPN package. They basically want it so that you're not flipping off of their games, and so that it's not like, oh, both games are at halftime in the noon window. Just push it back to 12:45, and that way you're at least watching one of them. But too good of a game. I'll be very much locked into that one. Over under 43.5, by the way. Real low on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Ole Miss, number 5, Ole Miss, number 9, Georgia. Georgia's a 7-point favorite. The over-under I have is 9 minutes and 47 seconds that Ole Miss will spend trailing in the second half. That is the amount of time that Ole Miss has spent trailing in the second half this year, all of which was last week against Washington State, of all teams. For a top 5 team, that is not a crazy stat. For a team that's got 4 wins by 1 score this year, that is a bananas stat, okay? It is also a relevant stat for a Georgia team that just seems to enjoy, bubble screens and digging itself a nice, cozy little double-digit deficit and then overcoming it. So, what do you do in your free time? Oh, I overcome double-digit deficits. It's just what I do. I'm Georgia.
A hobbyist, yes. Someone who enjoys these things. And again, they're not rattled, so maybe that's a positive.
Yeah, just what do you do in your leisure time? Oh, I just like making things more difficult on myself. I just like taking the first quarter off and then I'll show up and eventually, I'll do what I'm good at. But Ole Miss is comfortable playing with a small lead. And part of that is Trinidad Chambliss. Part of that is Kewan Lacey. They make smart decisions. They have really nice distribution in their passing game right now. They have like 4 guys right now in their receiver room. And you have to include Traquan Wright, the tight end as well. But they have like 4 guys that are separated by 80 yards. And they've done a really, really nice job game to game of just taking what's been given to them. And I think Chambliss deserves a lot of credit for that. He also has 202 yards after first contact, and he almost never scrambles. So that's design runs that we're talking about, where he can just pick up those 6-7 yards, push the pile. And that's a really difficult thing for a defense. And it's difficult to get off the field and feel like, oh, we're going to get that play to overcome that small deficit. And, that just speaks to the strength of this team. Over the course of a game, they're going to wear you down. Like Lacey is second among power conference backs behind Ahmad Hardy, of course, with 47 missed tackles forced. Will, you saw how tough it was for LSU to fall behind against Ole Miss. Like, they just don't make those plays that are going to open up the door for you. And Chambliss made mistakes in that LSU game, but when they're on offense, it feels very much like they're in control.
Yeah, I mean, again, I never thought I would yearn for the Mike Bobo offense, but here we are. I think that Georgia's been great at capitalizing on those chances. Let me just start here. Did you see that Lane kind of called Kirby fat ahead of this one?
Yeah, I did.
I had to go rewatch that because I had to make sure that wasn't AI.
It was based on the calories burned. Like, who do you think burns more calories in a game? And Lane said something to the effect of, I was catching Kirby's latest presser, and based on that, it looks like I'm burning more calories.
No, it doesn't look like he's burned too many calories, which is
that's it.
These two guys, like Kirby, is getting a little bit like, I don't know, he's say sassy, but like, yeah, like kind of in his older age, he's like letting it rip a little bit more. He's doing the tongue thing. He's celebrating with the fans. Like, I love this version of Kirby. I think Lane is kind of starting.
Well, Lane said that. Lane said that. Not Kirby.
I know, but I'm saying, like, I love this version of Kirby because previously he wouldn't entertain this type of stuff. It wouldn't shock me if they were to win, he would respond to this. He didn't used to be that type of coach ever. He used to remember the famous thing with Mullen where he's like, we just focus on recruiting, and that was seen as like a big comment. Feels like every game now Kirby is kind of starting to encroach into Lane's territory of being a troll. I feel like Lane's looking across the table like, buddy, this is my spot. I'm the one who's great on Twitter. I'm the one who's funny. You can't be doing the timeout stuff. Imagine if Lane's mad at him because he didn't think of that timeout thing. That's what it is.
To be fair, you can't be named Kirby and just yoked. And I realize Kirby's a former great player at Georgia. Okay, I'm talking about Kirby as a fully grown adult. That man was not going to age into this svelte figure. That was never going. And Lane knows himself all too well about what it's like battling the weight. Something that's very well documented. He's got his hot yoga now.
Yeah, Lane's got the V-neck on. He's the classic like former chubby guy. Not that he was ever chubby, but like guy that starts looking good and starts looking at other people. So not to sound this too long, but like I believe Ole Miss is one of like only 2 teams in the SEC that Kirby Smart has a losing record against. Now, again, across a couple of head coaches, they had that loss early. That doesn't, Kirby's first year, wasn't Lane Kiffin, whatever, but they did win this game last year. So I think the 2 teams, if I've kept it correctly, are LSU and Ole Miss, but they're across different head coaches because Orgeron beat him twice. Brian Kelly lost. Kiffin is now, I believe, 1-1. And so that being said, that he has proven that he is at least kind of a peer with Kirby Smart this game. With Austin Simmons, funny enough, last year he was the hero of this game. So I think that they can actually kind of look at each other and be rivals in this sense, where I feel like a Kirby Smart would never really take Lane Kiffin seriously because he struggled in these big games against these more talented teams. I think that the resilience that Ole Miss has shown this year is really impressive. That being said, I'm going Georgia in this one.
I don't blame you. Will, can you imagine? And I realize Kirby doesn't want people heaping praise on his team in the offseason. It's the Nolan Smith, tell everybody we're going 7-5. He doesn't want people to. Georgia doesn't need that. But if he ever did, and if he ever felt like, man, I wish people would just talk about us as this giant, this juggernaut, and he wanted to bring some of that back because for whatever reason he felt like he lost it. Maybe this is a storyline for like 2-3 years down the road. If Kirby went through a physical transformation in which he came back, maybe he's doing the hot yoga, and he lost like 40, 50 pounds and just came in to fall camp looking yoked. Can you imagine the things we would say about Georgia?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's what they're missing. Like, they're going to get there. He's going to pull up in a convertible instead of the Ford and be like, all right, guys, I'm here. I'm locked in. By
He
the
won't
way,
do that though.
3 SEC teams. Obviously, Alabama, not even worth bringing up, but he has a losing record against Alabama, losing record against Ole Miss. Nailed that 1-2 against both. So funny enough, now like this is a team that, and again with last year, they have kind of, it hasn't been a blowout the way it has with other teams. Let's put it that way.
Kirby's such a psycho that he wouldn't even let himself do something like that, because if he did, people would use it against him and say, "You're too busy getting in shape instead of recruiting."
Point.
So
that's a really good. He would be posting pictures of himself every day recruiting while he was on the treadmill. Like, look, guys, I'm still locked in. You're so right.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a game that has eluded Lane in his time as a head coach. For all the things that he has overcome, a win like this would very much be the first of its kind at Ole Miss. He is 1-9 against AP top 25 teams in true road games. Lone win was 2023 at Tulane, who had a backup quarterback. Michael Pratt wasn't playing in that game. Lifetime, his entire career as a head coach, you want to include Tennessee, you want to include USC, FAU, all of it. He's 3-14 in these spots. That is the same record as Mike Riley.
Well, at least he's not.
Give me Lane over James Franklin.
Oh, facts.
All day, every day. Even Mark Stoops is 6-14 in these matchups, and he kind of gets criticized for that as well. So this has been something that Lane is, preventing him from being considered a tier 1 elite coach in this sport. Last I checked, Will, Georgia is still unbeaten at home against non-Alabama teams in the 2020s. We're getting a little bit wordy with that.
That's still crazy. There's been a lot of teams that have tried.
Revenge game for Kirby, and not just because Lane called him fat. I think Georgia only falls behind 7-0 instead of 10-0 or 14-0. And then it's almost all dogs from there. I think that's how it plays out. Kind of an inverse of last year's game in some ways. I'm going with Georgia to dominate. I think they dominate Trinidad Chambliss in his first career road start. Yeah, first career road start. He's played in road games, technically, because he played at Kentucky. But did he play against Kentucky? Very limited against Kentucky. Maybe no. That was still a Simmons. Simmons started that game, and I don't think Chambliss came into that.
No,
one.
You're right. That was the one that it was the he's going to work through it game.
Right.
So yeah, like it was like, okay, he threw the picks, but we're going to figure it out, and then it was like he's no longer going to figure it out.
First career road game, Trinidad Chambliss. Georgia wins 27-10.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's why I was kind of like looking at you when you were like, oh, he hasn't won this game before. Because again, Lane won this game last year, but I mean, it's something that you hit on, and it feels like it's become more and more important over these last couple of years. Don't know why. Expanded playoff, limited rosters. I don't know why, but winning on the road has just become, it feels way harder. Maybe there's a lack of dominant teams, like those old Alabama and Georgia teams. You just go in everybody's house and whoop them, and it was like another just Tuesday in the office. But they're harder to come by now, and you're so right. I think that the things that Georgia is good at are things that Ole Miss can kind of struggle at. And again, like Ole Miss beat LSU, I get that, but a lot of it was LSU's miscues. I don't think Georgia really makes a ton of those, and especially when it matters. Like we've talked about, what is your DNA in these big moments? Georgia has proven. I'll put it to you like this: if Georgia was given LSU's lot in that game, I think they win that game. Like after halftime, like if they come in, they're trailing at half. He has Lane Kiffin has this great record when leading at halftime. I think that what I've seen out of Kirby Smart, especially given how the Auburn game played out and how they have been a second half team against Tennessee and others, it's like I think that they just sit there kind of in wait, and they're lurking and they're waiting for the other team to make a mistake. And I think this is still an Ole Miss roster that we saw it as kind of a rebuilding year, even when we thought Austin Simmons was like kind of the guy. I think that the ability that Georgia has to lean on you, even though, again, they've not really been able to get after the quarterback with what truly is sacks. Maybe they've had pressures here and there. I do think they dial up some interesting stuff here, just to your point about, the design QB runs and not exactly the option, but kind of the where's the ball game with Lacey and the receivers and some of the RPO stuff. So I think Georgia really uses this kind of almost like the Texas blueprint of we're going to lock in and beat you one-on-one. I think they have the talent to do that against Lane Kiffin, and I think they're going to have a reason to be mad at Ole Miss. That's the thing. Like, it's hard these days for Georgia to find some motivation against certain teams, especially now that the coach with Lane Kiffin. I think it might be a little bit of a bloodbath on Georgia's favor.
Yeah, and this would be a really nice win for Georgia. This would be, just to kind of feel like you have that home field advantage again against a team that isn't necessarily Kentucky, and certainly would add to their resume. All right, number 4, Texas A&M, 7.5-point favorites against Arkansas. The over-under I have is 22 scrimmage touches for Ruben Owens. A bummer. Le'Veon Moss expected to miss extended time. Doesn't look like it's season ending, but to be out for a while based on the comments from Mike Elko. I do think this A&M team is built to handle that better than last year's team did, because Owens is healthy, and that's a big part of this. 22 scrimmage touches is his career high. It was 2 weeks ago against Mississippi State. He had 17 carries last week, even though it was mainly just 3 yards in a cloud of dust. No run longer than 7 yards on those 17 carries. Credit Florida's defensive line for that. But Arkansas's run fits a little different than Florida's. Just a little bit. 13 rushing touchdowns allowed in the last 4 games. A minimum of 3 rushing touchdowns that they have allowed in those last 4 games. Every one of those teams against Arkansas has run the ball at least 40 times. Don't you think that Colin Klein is probably going to recognize that? If you had to guess, give the ball to Ruben Owens a whole lot. Ole Miss is the only one that did not hit 200 yards against Arkansas in that stretch. Here's the good news for Arkansas. No Jerry World. You're gone. Out of that building. The place where dreams go to die for the Hogs. You're not
for
going
anyone,
there
really.
anymore.
There's the opposing team is the only one who benefits in Jerry World.
The Packers benefited so much from that building, too. Golly, they do.
They really did, yeah.
Yeah. First time that A&M will travel to Arkansas as an SEC member since 2013, which also means that this is A&M's first trip to Arkansas as an SEC member in which it won't have Johnny Manziel. There's a stat.
Wow.
It's got the second coming of Johnny Manziel and Marcel Reed. Guys, I'm kidding.
Dude, I'm still waiting for Johnny Manziel to sneak onto their sideline as they get better throughout the year in his old jersey. Like he didn't just hang out with Pavia and pick him over Reed.
He didn't pick him. He's, what do you mean?
Were they off that week?
No. Come on, he's showing his guys some love. It's a good opportunity for. I love seeing that. It's like it's Diego Pavia's childhood hero watching Johnny Manziel, and he's showing up to watch it. I got no problem with that. There's plenty of time. Manziel's been on the sideline plenty of times for A&M in the last year plus, I believe.
No,
right?
yeah, I know. It's just if I'm Marcel Reed, I'm saying keep that side, and just this is like the dream that Oklahoma is trying to do, or South Carolina, where they have 2 good running backs and the good running quarterback. And again, Le'Veon Moss is like the best. It's like the player in the SEC who is the best, who is the least important, if that makes sense, because we love Ruben Owens. Like, it's just, we talked about it in the offseason, and I've been saying from the beginning, like, this guy's been banged up kind of his whole A&M career. Not whole career, but he didn't finish the season healthy last year, didn't really start the season healthy this year. He's just not been a super healthy player. Not his fault or anything, but it's not like he's been Mr. Dylan Sampson, who's just, he ended the year hurt as well. But that's why it's good to have lots of options, folks. But that being said, Ruben Owens is just maybe the best backup to an important player like that. And again, Marcel Reed is your, second or third most dynamic runner on a given night anyway. And he would be, most people would take him as a running back because he's so shifty. So I think that if you have a defense who is willing to give you the run and a quarterback who is happy to beat the mess out of a team while attempting 2 passes, I think this will go their way very handedly. I think that as good as the Arkansas offense has been, Bobby P ain't put a foot in the dirt to stop Marcel Reed.
They said on the broadcast last week, I don't know if you had audio on this, if you picked up on this too, but it was one of those when I was like, what are we talking about here? They said Marcel Reed was a reluctant runner, which I was like, what? Marcel Reed? We're talking about the same guy, right? He's got 22 scrambles this year. That's second among SEC quarterbacks. Jackson Arnold is the only one with more. Just weird. I'll agree to disagree on that one, but maybe he isn't as willing as Taylon Green, the Four Loko quarterback, but he's down for anything. So when you're drinking Four Loko, run, pass, hurdle, skip, whatever.
These are like the angel of the devil on your shoulder. It's like Marcel Reed is like the in phase. I'm going to run what my coach tells me to. I got good receivers. I trust them. And at the other end, it's like, I'm going to do a backflip right now. I'm in the pocket. I'm just going to do a backflip. I don't need to. Oh, here I go. Here's a backflip. And now the guy's open.
Yeah, sure. He'll do it all. He's willing to. He had so many of those moments too. Like, I know we talk a lot about Sellers being able to escape pressure. I actually thought Taylon Green, albeit in a imperfect performance against Tennessee, in which the turnovers were again an issue, he still had so many moments where you're like, how is this guy going to escape this? How in the world? Where he peels it out so quick. He recognizes, because he's had to see it throughout his career so much, when a play is just going to hell. He's like, I'm getting out of this. And he'll do the thing where he spins out of it and he's all of a sudden running to his left so quickly upfield. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a very, very hard thing to do. And if he's having to do that against Cassius Howell this week, Good luck. Good luck. That's going to be difficult.
It's the basketball background. You always like to play basketball, or like how
Yeah.
basketball players are when they have trash teammates. We're usually the trash teammates, so I can't say we've had trash teammates, but it's like we're setting screens. You know what I'm saying? But you can see it kind of in like a first scoring option where it's like, I don't trust anybody out here. I'm just going to take this to the hole, and that's exactly how Taylor plays quarterback.
Yeah. Good news for Arkansas. This game not being in Jerry World means that you don't necessarily have to feel like something will go wrong. That's change of venue, so important for that. And even better, they've got Robert Patrick Petrino coaching in what might be the game that could land him this job. I'm not saying he's getting the job. I am saying if he does get the job, this win will be part of that resume. You're not going to lose this. You're not going to lose this game and win this job, in my opinion. I like maybe I'll be proven wrong on that. Money talks if you end up winning some of those games down the stretch, but this is kind of like your last opportunity to show like, hey, I can be better than the previous regime. And I always say like all the time, and I'll repeat it until I'm blue in the face. Interim coaches don't get jobs for close losses. They do not. Okay. I think this is a close loss, Will.
Yeah,
I think it's a close loss.
and I mean too, an A&M team that legitimized Bobby Petrino's return. Right, when you think about, they were the first ones to really trust him and bring him back as OC. He probably owes a lot of his current situation to A&M. So maybe
Would he say that? Would he say that though? With the way that the Jimbo dynamic played out, I don't know that Bobby would be willing to give them credit. Maybe the A&M administration, not so much his former boss.
See, that's what's weird about it is like, when you're at where Bobby was at in like a random directional Missouri school, right? It's like, yeah, I guess as a coach, you would never look yourself in the mirror and say, they took a big chance on me and I'm appreciative. You would say, why'd they let me go? I was cooking, because he was a good OC for them. He's a very similar copy paste situation, but I don't think he ends up at Arkansas without A&M. But to your point, it's probably a revenge game in his mind.
Revenge game for Robert Patrick. Music to my ears, but I think that defense just once again can't make the big stop that they need to. 31-28 A&M. I'm going Aggies improved to 13-1 in this matchup as members of the SEC, which has somehow only had 2 of these games decided by 3 scores. It's a weird rivalry. Really, really weird the way that it's played out. Not as lopsided within games as one would think based on that record, but I think once again A&M is able to find a way against Arkansas. All right, Mississippi State. Florida. Florida's a 9.5 point favorite. The over-under I have is 1.5 references to Dan Mullen. I love the Mullen Bowl. This is the Mullen Bowl. We can count that. Does he live tweet this game? Not when he's the coach at UNLV, but
I think he'll have over under 1 tweet about this game. Like not during the game, but just overall. I think he might get with a little in there,
If Florida loses, yes. If Florida loses, yes, because we know last year he liked to get a little bit salty on Twitter. A Mullen Napier side by side would go pretty hard about right now because you've got Napier in year 4. Mullen lasted 4 years. It would totally lack context. And Mullen was done, by the way. Like just in case we need to revisit that one more time, because I heard multiple people say this week they should have never fired Dan Mullen, even though like he was showing up to work knowing that he was done. And when you show up with that mindset, you're cooked and there's no alignment whatsoever. And we can't just ignore the context of that. I know I've repeated myself on that, but
well, it's a good note though, because it will be impossible for the rest of our lives, Connor, to put ourselves back in the COVID era mentality. And that's pretty much what cost him his job.
Yeah, he admitted that. That season did things to him mentally that I don't think a normal season would have. It's not an excuse, it's reality. And I think if there had been things that had unfolded differently, a normal loss to LSU instead of a thrown shoe loss to LSU, different conversation, different preamble to 2021, the whole deal. So he will still be brought up though. And if this game gets lopsided, maybe some people will wonder, and lopsided in the non-Florida direction. I'm talking about like if Mississippi State goes up big, then maybe all of a sudden you're getting that revisited on the broadcast. Will, maybe you'll disagree with this. I think a loss here and it's over for Billy Napier. Like, done.
Oh, yeah.
Done.
Listen, as somebody who has been admittedly pretty sheepish on coach firings, that's kind of bit me in the butt a couple times this year. Looking at you, Pittman and James Franklin. A loss to Mississippi State is just a move backwards. And I don't understand the line on this game. I'm going to be honest with you. Mississippi State, I think, has been roundly the better team this year. Hey, I get it. Texas happened. I get what the swap means. But like week to week, I feel like Mississippi State's been way better than a 9.5 point spread.
Yeah. Haven't won an SEC game yet with this coaching staff. That's part of it. Mississippi State's been good covering the spread. They didn't cover against A&M, but the game that they played against Tennessee, obviously the game that they played against Arizona State. Yeah, the optics would just be as bad as they can be for Florida. You can't lose to the guy that hasn't won an SEC game yet. Can't lose to the program that hasn't won an SEC game in 2 years. And we are respecters of Mississippi State and what they have done. And as people that watch this conference closely, we know this is not the same team that we saw last year. I think this defense could absolutely present problems for DJ Lagway. It has been very, very good in meaningful football, and it has been more so a byproduct. Like, they have been more a victim of their ineffective offense, which I think that's the more glaring unit for Mississippi State right now, which was not what we expected at all, but that's the way that this played out. And it won't necessarily matter for the Florida optics, for the Napier optics, if we all can acknowledge that this is a better Mississippi State team, because if you lose to them, you're 2-5 at best, at absolute best. 7-5 regular season win match last year, and I would not bank on that whatsoever with games away from home against Georgia and against Ole Miss. I don't need to revisit the Billy Napier record away from the swamp, but at this point, basura. This is the type of loss that if it happens in front of that fan base, which will bring it on Saturday, that would have that building just despondent, just totally like lost for words. How can this happen? How in the world could a losing performance be sandwiching the Texas win and then the USF loss? Like that, the Texas win would be in between those two games. And that just wouldn't make sense at all if you're thinking you're turning the corner in year 4. All that is possible, but I don't think it happens. I don't think Florida loses this game. I don't think Billy Napier gets fired on Sunday. I think Jaden Baugh is the big, big difference. Huge difference. 52 combined scrimmage touches the last 2 weeks. It's almost like Billy Napier listens to this show and every other show that talks about his team and very clearly sees, hey, that guy that doesn't wear gloves that's in your backfield, he should give the ball. He should have the ball 25 times a game and just don't worry about it, because your quarterback is playing on one leg right now, and that guy is running through contact and breaking tackles and looks like your offense should be built around him. So maybe you should. Just a thought.
You know what's funny? Real quick, we said like Jaden Baugh is like the best player on Florida's offense whenever they were struggling. And I feel as though because they have started to use Jaden Baugh, now the freshman receivers have kind of passed him in terms of overall talent. But that's only because, right? That's only because like those plays are only possible. This single coverage is only possible because we are now actually like the defense is crunching in and not as scared of the Lagway arm, which he makes them pay now, right? So I think that the story of Florida's turnaround could still run through Jaden Baugh, even if it didn't feel like this whole Jaden Baugh resurgence. And sorry, I didn't mean to step on your stat. What was your stat?
Yeah, 34 missed tackles forced this year. That's 5th among power conference running backs. That's really, you need that desperately with the way that this offense has been constructed. And we've talked about Billy Napier not really fooling a whole lot of people with his scheming, but you're right. The Dallas Wilson thing, it's real. It's real. I mean, he is awesome. Nobody's going to compare him to Jeremiah Smith or anything like that. It's not going to quite be like Ryan Williams last year because the lack of meaningful games that it feels like he's playing in. The Texas game was meaningful, but not meaningful from a playoff standpoint for Florida. But those two guys are great. And it's nice that Florida's offense, which was such a bad hang, has made the adjustments to now, one, just have Dallas Wilson at its disposal and he's healthy again. And two, recognize that in order to not be a bad hang, you need to give Jaden Baugh the football. I think it's a slow start for Florida's offense, but as we've seen with Mississippi State's defense this year, eventually that dam breaks. I'm going 28-14 Florida wins. Billy lives to fight another day.
I want to pick Mississippi State so bad. I picked Mississippi State to cover. How about that? Again, it's home and away, right? It's that they have been a different team, a worse team on the road. I won't say they've really been a better team at home, but they've certainly been a worse team on the road. I think this is a close win for Florida that makes them sweat a little bit, but I think Billy lives to fight another day. I think that's a Florida win and a Mississippi State cover. I mean, again, it's kind of funny that we have these two teams that are, again, kind of foils of each other, right? Where it's like, hey, we have these two offensive head coaches. They're supposed to get up and down the field, defense optional. But then you look at these teams, it's like these are defensive fortresses that struggle to move the football. And they're like DCs are the star of the show. And they have quarterbacks who are kind of like had all this hype and didn't live up to it. But they have running backs who are that dude. I talked about Fluff Bothwell with you ahead of the pod. I love watching him play. But again, the strength of Florida's defense, kind of in the interior.
Stopping the run,
like that's the thing. Is like the things that you like about Mississippi State offensively. Florida has that's kind of the one thing they can do. So yeah, I like Florida to win, but State to cover.
Yeah, Mississippi State just not sure they got enough firepower on offense. It would be a 180 for them to go into the swamp and put up significant points with the things that they've struggled to do in SEC play so far on the offensive side of the ball. All right. Number 21, Texas, 12.5-point favorites against Kentucky. The over-under I have is a 230 rushing yard advantage for Texas in this game. That's what they had last year. Yeah. Texas, 251 rushing yards. Kentucky, 21 in this game in Austin. Kentucky was sacked 6 times, contributed to that. Still pretty wild. Trey Wisner, 26 carries for 158 yards in this game last year. If he's right, big if, he gets fed a ton in this game, even if CJ Baxter returns, which there's hope that that's actually going to happen this week. Weird situation with him. I think they would like to play the long game with him with how much he's been banged up these last 14 months. I think they would really like to be able to have him for the long haul. Texas turned things around against Oklahoma because finally found that ground game identity that we've been waiting to see from this team all year. Here's a wild thought I saw CJ Vogel tweet about during a Sark press conference. Before the Oklahoma game, Texas did not have a running back who had recorded a 20-yard carry this year. That is hard to believe with the opponents that they faced in the games 2 through 4. Not even against Sam Houston State. They could get a running back.
Their breakout performance offensively, you're going to tell me they didn't run the ball for 20 yards? That's crazy.
They had one. I think they had the one Trey Wisner run, which that run was a huge play for Texas. Like it was in the second quarter where Oklahoma was up 6-0 at that point. And I talked about this a little bit on Sunday, but it looked like he had gotten bottled up in the backfield and he keeps his legs moving and he even fooled the cameraman at that point. It looks like, he just plays dead. And then he keeps the legs moving, squirts through 37-yard gain on this and to get into OU territory when Texas had just been getting shut out to that point. And Nick Brooks, the freshman left guard who's been kind of taking his lumps in pass pro, has been kind of part of the Texas concerns with their offensive line this year. He's trailing the play and he does this like emphatic first down sign. And those moments matter over the course of the season, especially for a team like Texas that has been so close to reaching the college football mountaintop, that has maybe at times this season had to just feel like it's having fun playing football in some of these games and where it's not this slog and this weight of expectations. I know that gets talked about just with Arch, but I think it needs to get brought up with this Texas team as a whole, albeit one that's got a very new look offensive line. Well, you got to be able to run the ball against this Kentucky team because they're allowing an average of 193 yards in 3 SEC games and 10 rushing scores allowed in those games. This is not a vintage Mark Stoops run defense by any stretch of the imagination. If I am Sark, I don't want this game to have 20 first half passing attempts for Arch Manning. I don't want that. No, I want to get those ground game options going. Maybe even those slow developing jet sweeps with the wide outs where you get Ryan Wingo going one way and DeAndre Moore is doing this. And all of a sudden you're like, like last year. And one of the things I asked Quinn Ewers about when he came on the pod during the playoff was like those slow developing run plays that you guys like to run where you just kind of have your back to a defense. Those got to be kind of terrifying, right? Like if you don't have faith in the system, you're blowing that play up just with anxiousness. I don't know that Texas has the offensive line to operate that, but you at least have to try it against a team like this to put that on film.
Yes, and I will say your stat was correct. I wasn't saying it was incorrect, but I do want to provide the context. That Texas has 2 quarterbacks and a wide receiver that have a 20-yard run. Because I'm thinking
a backup quarterback with a 20-yard, like a 37-yard run, whatever it was, as well, something like that,
yes.
Or a 50-yard run.
It's a 50-yard run, yeah. So I'm like, I've seen some Chuck run plays. They just came from other guys. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want to say Texas run the ball decently effectively. Yeah. Now that being said, after this game, I think they'll be able to say that a couple more times. This would be the funniest Mark Stoops. How do you like me now? I already said that about Billy Napier against this team. Would it be funnier or less funny than the Billy Napier game? 7 p.m. Kroger Field.
Not exactly as hostile of an atmosphere for Texas as what they saw at the Horseshoe or at the Swamp. I'm a Kroger Field respecter.
Nobody goes to the produce aisle and comes out unscathed. All right.
Look, Kroger, I think there were a lot of fans across college football that could go to Kroger Field on a given Saturday, even when Kentucky is basura and fans just feel like they can't wait for basketball to start. I think you could still go to that place in a given college football Saturday when a top 25 team comes in and be surprised at how good that atmosphere is. It is not a bad atmosphere by any stretch of the imagination. There will be pre-snap infractions from Texas, and there will be moments in this game in which Texas is going, oh, this is a road game. Probably not to the extent of what they have seen so far. Definitely not to the extent of what they have seen in that Florida game. So I'll at least say that, but this would be a really big time hottie like me now random SEC win for Mark Stoops when he hasn't beat a power conference team at home in front of the Kroger Field faithful in over 2 years. So
Yeah.
from that standpoint, yeah.
I think he'll get one of those this year again. Like we talked about, he could have, and I think maybe should have had Georgia last year in a very similar environment. And I'll say, like, Kentucky fans are among the most passionate and invested fans in the SEC, probably top 5 to me. But you got to count basketball, you got to count some of the other stuff. Like, they just have
you're saying fans as a whole, not just football
of the
fans.
university.
Yeah.
Like the people of Lexington really do get up. They just haven't had much to cheer for lately. You know what I'm saying? Like that's been a solid environment in some of these bigger years for them. I could kind of see it like with the blue and white. So not that that'll be the case here. So I don't want to be like, oh, like no one's scared of this environment. The fans really do care and show up. They just, why would you for right now? But that being said, I think they have one of these in them. It could be, I think this game could be sneaky close, you know, just because of the way that both teams want to control the ball. Like this team could be one of those, you know, the how bad do we get beat chart comes out and Texas is way ahead, but the final score is like 10 points in the end, probably.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm going to call it. I think that Texas will control this game, but because of the game script, it will feel to a degree, that's like kind of how the first half was against Georgia, where it's like they kind of have a chance to get back in this one, but they're Kentucky, right? And so I think that's probably what we're going to see here. Maybe, you know, could have an Arch Manning breakout game, but I do think there is some pride in that.
Last week, I think counts as a breakout game for Arch.
Yeah, well, I think too, that was more of like a Texas total like defense game. Like I think the whole team just came to play last week versus Arch kind of carrying them. He may do a little bit of this against this defense, but I do think that the Kentucky defense has some pride to him. So I could see an interception here. We saw that against Ole Miss, right? So, but that being said, probably spending too many words on this game. I think we know how this is going to go.
I agree with that breakdown and have a 10-point Texas win. I have 27-17, so technically Kentucky is going to cover that spread, but it's going to be a game in which it doesn't really feel like it's in doubt. Texas kind of feels like it's in control. Cutter Boley against this Texas defense is going to be really, really tough. He was a guy last year who came in for an injured Brock Vandegrift in this game, and albeit with Texas already up 24-7, and made some nice throws, some throws that had kind of been lacking for Kentucky. And I've revisited the Nick Roush tweet from this week in which he got the all right from McConaughey after this one and gave him a nice little pat on the back. Can you imagine being a true freshman going into Texas and getting the stamp of approval from McConaughey? That's got to be worth something in life. I don't know what Carter Boley's football career is going to end up being. In the grand scheme of his SEC experience, his college football experience, that's going to be up there at the top. Like just that is at least a cool moment for that kid.
That's something to hope for. And hey, Kentucky, if you do score, you know, a couple touchdowns here, maybe your first touchdown, get this out of the way. Just be aware of the Manning family. If you want to throw any footballs at them, they could probably catch them. So just be aware. Make your touchdowns count in this one. All right.
Is Cooper going to be there? Of course he will, right? I would assume he's going to be there. Was he at Florida?
Tell me,
because I wasn't. I was. Because I was there, so like I wasn't watching that one on TV, so I don't remember if we. I assume that Cooper's going to be there as well. All right, number 11 Tennessee, number 6 Alabama, huge matchup. Alabama's an 8.5 points favorite. The over under I have is 24 Tennessee points. I realize there is an actual team total for this, and it's 24.5 on FanDuel last I checked. But why 24 points for Tennessee? Why is that the number? Well, it is the most points that Tennessee has scored in Tuscaloosa in its last 10 trips. All of which were losses. No Tennessee wins in Tuscaloosa since 2003. Worth noting, Josh Heupel was responsible for that 24-point effort. It came in a loss in 2021, sort of in a way. I remember, and I wrote about this I was filling in for Matt for the column that Matt Hinton usually does for us on SDS. And I wrote about how this felt like a coming out party for the Josh Heupel offense. And I do think we could look back on that with what they were doing with Hendon Hooker and think at the time, like, because they really respected Alabama defense. That was a pretty impressive year one performance in the moment that we thought this is going to be legitimate with Josh Heupel, what he's doing. Well, Tennessee is the number one offense in America right now at 48 points per game.
And it feels that way. And it feels more legitimate than it has in other years.
And I realize you could take away, if you take away the non-offensive scores, which is part of it, they have 4 non-offensive touchdowns. It's 43.5 points per game. But
good.
Think about it.
Awesome.
Yeah, whatever. That's fine. If you had told me that in August, I would have laughed in your face. And we wondered if this was going to be a floor season for Tennessee. But think about this team that lost their top 3 in receiving. They lost 4 offensive linemen. They lost the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. Oh, by the way, they had a post-spring departure at QB1. And you look up, and Josh Heupel is the number one offense in America at the midway point of the season. How? It's truly remarkable. And I don't know that means that it gets them back to a college football playoff this year or anything like that. Schedule's still really difficult. Margin for error is going to be really slim, especially if they can't figure out some of these things on defense. But just the fact that we're bringing that up at this point of the season, Josh Heupel's an adult who gets it. And if you're a Tennessee fan that's going to be discouraged after this game and you're going to say, man, he just can't win these road games, just remind yourself of those things and remind yourself that's the type of thing that could happen for a Butch Jones season going into it. And then you would just watch a Butch Jones team score 10 points per game and just be a total disaster. It's just such a different era of Tennessee football. And I think stats like that are an important reminder.
Yes, and to be clear, I wasn't like poo-pooing your stat. I was just saying, like, good for them. They've been able to get those scores.
Yes,
like
like
it's hey, would be nice to have, right? So that being said, I think this is going to be a very, very fun up and down game. Want to get a camera on Roll Tide Willie? I know a lot was made of him this offseason, but just slamming his fist into the table because this is not going to be an old school SEC game. This is going to be two offensive coaches who have 2 quarterbacks who are dialed in, who are, again, operating inside the offense, outside of the offense with confidence. Again, 2 of the more confident quarterbacks in the SEC that know their guys, trust their personnel. I do think that some of the knock on the Josh Heupel offense, and I'll say it ad nauseum because it's an offense that I've studied it late because it's so fascinating to me. Kind of the roadblocks where, hey, particularly in SEC games, number one, and on the road, this offense can kind of sputter when it gets too locked in a phone booth, right? Well, Aguilar is exactly, we talked about it. He's the guy that is running so hard, he's taking out Arkansas's communications, right? Like, he is not going to just crumple in the pocket like we've seen.
That play is so funny to look back on. Like, I hope he's okay, and I hope it wasn't long-term damage, but that play was so ridiculous. That never happens.
That might be the play of his career that I remember him by, because he was like, well, all right, need to get back out there. Cool. And that's him. There is no Yamaliava looking at the sidelines like, what do we do, coach? Doing the sad into the Arkansas game. Like, that's not in Aguilar's vocabulary. He'll throw a pick, but he's going to go down swinging. And so point being, I think both of these quarterbacks are like that, where the offenses are awesome. All right. The talent is awesome. Some of the better receivers in the SEC. Who would have thought that we would like a Tennessee receiver better than an Alabama receiver going into this game? But I feel this way. Do you?
Chris Brazzell has had a heck of a season. Now, I think if you're doing schoolyard lineup, you're still probably taking Ryan Williams over Chris Brazzell.
Yep.
And I'm not Tennessee fans. I respect what Chris Brazzell has done this year. He has been awesome, and he's got better numbers every which way. I'm just saying, in a nutshell, if you're trying to pick which guy do you want, Tennessee fans will disagree with that. That's perfectly fine. But you're right. Like, you talk about Heupel. This is a huge how do you like me now opportunity for all the obvious reasons that we already laid out with the haven't won in Tuscaloosa since 2003, all of this goodwill that Alabama's that's been built up, and how you're trying to get back to the college football playoff and do so with a team that just had the slate wiped clean from an offensive standpoint. Also remember too, Ty Simpson was the 5-star quarterback from your state.
Good point.
That went to Alabama. That probably could have left at different points that maybe at one point you're even interested in. I don't know how serious that was, but definitely was seen as a huge recruiting loss for Tennessee at the time and a huge recruiting gain for Alabama at a time when all of a sudden they're stacking these 5-star quarterbacks in ways that they weren't in the first part of the Saban era. And this is
Star Jackson disrespect.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, continue.
They weren't. They weren't stacking 5-star quarterbacks. There was a stat that came out about, like, if Ty Simpson was going to be on the roster at the same time as this guy, Bama would have, including Bryce Young, like 3 or 4 or 5-star. It didn't end up shaking out like that, but you get what I'm saying. But I think if you're looking at what's going to determine this matchup, we're once again going into a competitive game. another AP top 25 team for Alabama, in which we're wondering, are they going to stop an efficient rushing attack? Perhaps more importantly, maybe stop isn't the right word. Can you limit that rushing attack by keeping it off the field and being good defensively on first down, that's going to be really important for this Alabama defense because you're trying to keep a team like Tennessee behind schedule. Alabama has allowed 9 runs of 20 yards in SEC play, easily the worst in the SEC. Easily the worst. Only one of 3. They're one of only 3 SEC teams that has allowed more than 4 runs of 20 yards in conference play. Who's one of those other teams, Will? Tennessee.
Yeah, I was about to say it's so weird to say that about these two teams too, because one thing we could have hung our hat on for the last, I don't know, at least the Josh Heupel era, at least, outside of was it like a Pitt game they had where that random running back Abadakanda ran all over them. Outside of that, I feel like the running backs have not beaten them.
Yeah. And it's just not necessarily been an Achilles heel, but this year it definitely has been. You can run on Tennessee. The question is whether Alabama wants to do that or not. Not sure about Jam Miller as of this recording on Wednesday. We're recording this at 12:15.
He got smoked, man.
Dude,
I would be so mad if I was a Bama fan. He got that was a little bit of
How is that not targeting? We should have brought that up the other day. I thought that was textbook targeting on that play.
Yeah, when you win, the bad officiating doesn't get brought up as much. That's a really good point because maybe it was kind of a makeup call for like the other one or whatever. But I mean, Mizzou was like laying some lumber. That's the thing.
Yeah, that was a big time hit he took on that 4th down conversion. Will, Bama has run the ball at least 38 times in the 3 games since he's been back, and not just with Caden Proctor. They have been, and by the way, Caden Proctor only having a PFF rushing grade of 66.6.
Disgusting. He's a specialist. All right.
Get out of here. The man made a jump cut. He made a jump cut at 366 pounds. 66.6.
The PFF grade has to take into account BMI. All right.
Come on. Give us some context. Pound for pound. No, you can't say that because he's heavy. But you get what I'm saying.
Reverse pound for pound.
Reverse pound for pound. Those yards matter. Bama's just been more run heavy than I think some people realize amidst this Ty Simpson emergence. And that balance has really allowed Ty Simpson to see the field effectively. I think it's helped. And Ty Simpson, I think you've brought this up on the show before. We need to revisit it after what we heard about this week. He sounds like Saban, man. He sounds just like his former coach. Saw this tweet from Charlie Potter. Caden Proctor said Simpson ripped the team on Monday. Ripped them in a team meeting. He's so critical of himself after these games. If you watch him with his media availability where he's got like the stats and he's looking over, he's just like shaking his head. Like, dude, you're the Heisman Trophy favorite now, right? You used to be 3 consecutive AP top 25 teams, 2 of which were away from home. You made some big time throws. No, not good enough.
I hear the Nick Saban in the background. I'm not going to do the voice, but I hear the hand motion start to come out. Oh, Heisman, we're going to hang that banner. Like, I love Ty Simpson, man. There's so much to like about this Alabama team. It really upsets me how likable this Bama team is.
Do you think someone tells Ty Simpson something good he did and he just rattles off 6 ites in a row? That's the only thing that's preventing him from being just Saban 2.0.
His girl's like, hey, you took me to a nice dinner. He's like, hey, we're trying to be one another day. Focus on the little things. My parking job wasn't great. I had to hit a 4-point turn in there. And I love that. I mean, leadership has to come from somewhere, specifically in the transfer portal era. And again, Brian Grubb, Ty Simpson, Caden Proctor as a leader, Braille's like the leadership and the resilience this team has had has been awesome. So again, just for both of these teams, it's kind of the program. Like this is kind of a how deep is our brand and how deep is our leadership following the FSU loss, following the loss of Yamaleava and the Georgia loss on the other side. These are 2 sturdy programs as we see here in 2025.
It's funny because Jalen Milroe came on the show and he said the moment he realized that Kalen DeBoer was different than Nick Saban was when he made a really nice touchdown pass in practice, and Milroe wasn't celebrating afterwards. And DeBoer was like, "What are you doing, man? Like celebrate, enjoy it." Simpson's the last breed. He's the last of a dying breed.
Do you think he calms Kalen DeBoer down? Like, do you think that Kalen DeBoer is clapping at practice and Ty Simpson just looking at him like, what are you excited about? This is a practice field, son.
Do you remember the gif a few years ago from Dan Mullen on the sideline with Felipe Franks? And Dan is doing this like dorky dance and he's trying to get Felipe to loosen up a little bit. That's Kalen DeBoer and Ty Simpson behind closed doors.
Yep.
Maybe in public. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Saban's watching them from the bridge of the stadium like the Death Star, like, good, my son.
Right. Good. This is how I've trained you. Speaking of Saban, Will, you know what he never did? God, people are going to take this the wrong way. Nick Saban never, because I don't think he ever had the opportunity to do this, beat 4 AP top 25 teams in consecutive weeks without a single bye week in between. That is what Alabama is setting out to do on Saturday. This is a revenge game for Alabama. Forget about just the black hoodie, which, by the way, Kalen DeBoer is 13-2 in that black hoodie. He's 18-3 against AP top 25 teams since he became a power conference head coach, which now this is year 4 of that. We're including his 2 years at Washington. He's 24-0 in home games. 24-0.
Insane.
Add another one of those totals.
Insane.
That's darn good. It's darn good. I think Alabama wins this one 35-24. Yes, I picked 24 specifically for Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's the first Bush administration, right? Where you talk about 2003 and the 24-point streak, and it just again goes to show the dominance. It's so funny, again, not to compare these two coaches, guys, but the Saban stuff, it was that he got hot so early after year one. We don't count year one coaches, right, because of Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, right? And so it was that he got hot so early and he stayed so consistent. The DeBoer stats are like limited sample size horror. It's like, I hope this guy takes a step back, and he kind of did last year. But that being said, yeah, I think this is an up and down game, but I think that given what we've seen about Alabama, given what we've seen out of that building, we've seen how much of an effect that the building had last year in this game. So that being said, like I do pick Bama, and honestly, 35 almost feels low against this Tennessee defense. I think it could be 24, maybe into like a 28 or like a 31 for Tennessee, but then Bama is like getting into the upper 30s or 40s because I think Ty Simpson's he's going to show up with a little tucked in lobster bib ready to go on this defense, man.
Tennessee needs to get those corners back healthy, man. They just do. Just do. All right. Number 16, Mizzou, 1.5-point favorites against Auburn. The over-under is one reference to quarterbacks who came out of the hospital just in time to overcome a double-digit deficit. What could I possibly be referring to? Brady Cook last year. This game. Mizzou hosting Auburn last year. You know how that played out. Brady Cook came out of the hospital and overcame a double-digit deficit. And it was kind of this, oh my God, how did you lose this game, Hugh Freeze moments. The good news for one Hugh Freeze is that Brady Cook is on the Jets practice squad. The bad news for Hugh Freeze is that Bo Perbula can do all the things that post-hospital Brady Cook can do. That's not ideal.
You're as good as your predecessor fresh after the hospital.
The amount of zoomies that Brady Cook had coming out of the hospital last year, playing in this game in the fourth quarter, he was a different version of himself. Maybe they need to give that whatever it was that got him to his best version of himself. They need to get some of that to Bo Perbula in what will be his first career road start. Technically, we're counting that as first career road start, even though he did have meaningful reps in that game at Wisconsin last year. But I do think that it's just beyond bizarre that this is Mizzou's first game away from Como, and we're in week 8. It's so strange. It's hard to even process it. And every time I say that stat, I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, they didn't have a neutral site game. Oh, yeah, they didn't do like the weird Oklahoma thing where they played at Temple or something like that. No. First true road game, first game away from home this season. Also beyond bizarre, Will, is what I would call the Damari Alston situation at Auburn.
Yes. Just another day in Auburn news cycle, huh?
Man. Not surprising. I hate to say it with the way things have played out at Auburn the last few years, but there's a guy who was voted a captain, RB1 to start the year, and Hugh Freeze announced this week that he is no longer with the team. Apparently, he wanted a redshirt because he was at the 4-game mark. He was banged up in the first month of the season. But Freeze said, quote, he failed to meet the expectations and standard of our program. Several players spoke out in support of Alston on social media. Seemed to be several others who were kind of like, hey, Jackson Arnold, I know, was like, hey, we need the guys that want to be around. Bad optics. Just not the type of thing that you would like to be talking about going into what is a pivotal game and an opportunity to pick up a top 25 win, which last I checked, Hugh Freeze needs those. Bad optics would be Hugh Freeze falling to 0-4 in conference play with a home loss to Mizzou. And I say that as a Mizzou respecter. I was one of the people saying, guys, if you haven't watched this team, they are more complete than you probably realized. But Will, if you're unable to win this one at home, if you're Hugh Freeze, it is so much worse than a bad road loss. Of the 7 FBS firings this year, I think we're at 7. Yeah, whatever. 6 of them came on the heels of a home loss. James Franklin, Sam Pittman, Mike Gundy, Deshaun Foster, Brent Pry, Trent Bray. Athletic directors physically seeing their own fans clear out of their stadium, their most important building on that campus, wherein they rely on millions of dollars coming in on these fall football Saturdays. The optics are always worse at home. Okay. I think this would be very much the case for Auburn Athletic Director John Cohen if he saw those types of optics, who spoke with AL.com this week about Freeze's future. And don't you know it, he got weird with it. Did you see this quote, Will?
I actually did. Go ahead.
Not to go full James Franklin, but it makes my skin crawl. He said, quote, to AL.com, I don't know if I'm going to walk outside and my car is going to start or not. I have an expectation it will, but if my car doesn't start enough, then I will evaluate that and make decisions about my car. But that's not my expectation at this point about our football program. Weird quote from a weird guy, Will.
And a guy whose life in the last couple of months has just completely been different, because he had like the Bruce Pearl, I'm going to go be a senator thing, you know what I'm saying? Which I'm sure they had conversations about that. I'm sure something like that doesn't like strike you, but you have this massive cachet as an athletic director because you got, oh my gosh, I probably have the best head coach in the SEC in basketball, where basketball is similar to the Florida situation where it's like, don't worry about this. It's just historic, right? Like if you're a Florida fan, you're probably mad at what I just said, but historically,
I was going to say Florida fans aren't going to like that.
Stability-wise, as an athletic director, you know, you have one guy who again like had a scandal and everything. I guess Bruce Pearl technically had a scandal, whatever. But in terms of stability, like I feel good about this guy. He's good. Like oh no, my whole world is crumbling down. I need to do something about this. I don't know if we've seen a 180 like we've seen with John Cohen.
Yeah, I think Freeze needs to win this game to save his job. To keep his job, I should say. Save is the wrong word. I think if he loses, he's fired on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's easy. And like I'm right there with you. And I would say this. I wonder, you know, again, night game, Jordan Hare. Not Jordan, as Kirby Smart says. Yeah. And so I think he's a troll, man. Anyway, so but yeah, I wonder if this crowd is going to be okay. This is setting up for an all-time throw stuff on the field game. Let me put it to you like that. This is setting up for an all-time throw stuff on the field game
because of officiating.
Overall, loose. They could be throwing
for
stuff.
Texas.
They could be throwing stuff at their coaching staff. They could be throwing stuff at anyone. But I'm saying like either the home team disappoints and the fans are an angry mob, like SpongeBob style, trying to carry him out of the stadium, or like officiating, they're on his side. I think they need to basically harness that energy after what happened last week in that building and not have the crowd kind of booing and working against them. Because I think this crowd doesn't know what to feel at this point. I don't know if they're behind, like, because when something like that happens to your team, you want to rally behind your head coach, but I don't think they're very happy with their head coach either. So if he gives them a reason to believe, you know, in a ranked matchup against, you know, a Mizzou team that is favored, you know, I think that they could really use this crowd, and their defense has been good. But if they do typical Hugh Freeze things and make drama where there shouldn't be, and we got 5 different play callers, and we got dudes getting diagnosed with hearing loss, so we got dudes leaving the team, but we got championships that are not, you know, we're not thinking about football, we're thinking about other stuff, you know, and that's kind of been the Hugh Freeze experience, is we're talking about officiating or all this different roster stuff versus this. And so point being, I think Hugh Freeze has a chance to kind of quell the Auburn fan base, who is just mad in general, and get them on his side to be us against the world, or they could be us against us against our head coach. So like I said, I think this is an all-time throw stuff on the field game. I think it could be an officiating, or it could be the coaching staff, but it's going to be on Hugh to get it going quickly.
I think Mizzou wins 21-17, and the Freeze era ends with a Jackson Arnold sack taken on a last-ditch drive.
You know, I wonder, because that's a stat that's specific to Auburn. I need to go back and look at that stat for him at Ole Miss, because I feel like, you know, he was better at that there. That was what he was at least known for. Maybe that's something that's inverted in his career, or maybe he was just getting good PR because of the couple of Bama wins. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that, again, we just saw weirdness in Jordan Hare, and this crowd is going to be angrier than it was last week. But with how Mizzou is built, and that they shouldn't be taking a lot of chances downfield if they're smart, I think you shouldn't have to against Auburn, because Auburn sure isn't. It's one of the classic situations, right, where Like Jackson Arnold has 0 picks on the year. That's like a terrible thing because he's like not even trying, right? At least Boba Buell is slinging it. I think in this game though, it's kind of inverted where it's like, hey, Boba Buell, you don't need to try. You trust your team, you trust your defense, you trust your running back options, and kind of just keep Auburn behind the line of scrimmage like Georgia was able to do. But yeah, I think Mizzou is a better football team. I think the home atmosphere, again, we saw that last week. It by itself is not enough.
It's just not at this point anymore. It's not, and that feels bad to say that about Auburn, who, again, I will always praise Auburn fans still caring, still making a hostile atmosphere when they know their team is not playing for an SEC championship, and knowing that when the sun goes down and Jordan-Hare, those lights come on, it's not a place that you typically enjoy being in. Even if you get out of there with a win, you're not supposed to enjoy your time there. I think we're reaching a point. We've already reached a point. I talked about it last week, how the Jordan-Hare magic is gone. I think we're reaching a point where apathy could very much take over, and that's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous.
You know what's worse, really quick? I'll say the Jordan-Hare magic is still possible because we saw it last week, but this Auburn staff can't get out of its way. That's the sad part of it, is that game was there for the taking, and they just said, here, you can have it. So that's to your point, not about Auburn fans, not about the building, not about even the administration. It's about, we've seen it where there is a potential for this, and then Hugh Freeze just goes, I'm going to forget I have a running back, or I'm going to get a running back kicked off my team, or some other random thing. So, yeah, I will say, like, for whatever next head coach, you do have that atmosphere to look forward to.
You do. You very much do. All right, let's end with some fade of the week before we kick it to Jesse. Yes, fade of the week. Another outright win for the team that I picked against. Oh no, Indiana beat Oregon. How awful. Terrible. Oops, my bad.
Oh my gosh, Mr. Gigabraid over here. I see the reverse jinx.
If you're fading, you're 6-1. If you're not, I'm sorry, but I feel like that's on you at this point.
There's a warning label right now. Just imagine it.
We've rebranded. This is a fade, okay? I'm giving you free money by doing this. Friday night game, Will. Louisville's a 13.5-point underdog at Miami. Weird things happen on Friday nights. Maybe a weird thing would be me actually getting a pick right. A non-SEC pick. I've actually done really well against the spread SEC-wise this year. I thought about bringing my record to the table, and then I thought nobody's going to give a crap about that. It's all about the fate of the week. Do we think that a Friday night at Hard Rock Stadium, do we think that atmosphere is going to be elite? Or do we think a few other things might be going on? It's not technically Miami, if we're being honest. It's not. Do we think that's going to be the place to be on a Friday night? I don't know.
Really quick, I don't think they've earned a Friday game. I don't know what Tiger Stadium would do on a Friday. I've never seen it, but I feel like we are getting to a point with Miami where they're good enough to where their Saturday atmosphere should start to get solid, because they do have a ton of fans. Like, that's the thing. We talk about pricing people out NFL Stadium, but it would be interesting to see if Miami develops a home field advantage at some point over this Mario run, but not on Friday night.
Not on Friday night. No way. Maybe a Miami team that's already beat 3 ranked teams will maybe not show up with the exact right approach for Jeff Brom and company. Maybe. Since 2018, Will, Jeff Brom is 4-4 against top 10 teams. That's at Purdue and Louisville. All right. Same record in those games as Mario Cristobal. Go figure that Miami's last home loss was to number 9 Louisville in 2023. Interesting. Not saying Louisville pulls off the upset, even though I did pick them to go to the college football playoff this year and thought that Miami would fall apart. Louisville can't run the ball, which is probably not going to happen no matter what against that Miami defensive front, a defensive front that Jeff Brom said was better than any SEC defensive front the last 3 to 4 years, which...
Why? I was talking about that with some Miami fans in my group chat the other day, and I'm like, why do we feel the need to do this?
You're right. He's right, I think, though. And the stopping point, the absolute no, don't say this, and why he said 3 to 4 years, because he was curious how it was probably going to be interpreted. 2021 Georgia is the place where you go. Don't say that group is better than 2021 Georgia. But everybody else, you could kind of make the argument. You could say that there are different dudes from different defensive lines, but I still would say this Miami defensive front is the real deal.
They're awesome. So. That's kind of what I was telling them, is like, Miami has the unique opportunity to be their own thing because they do have a really cool culture out there, and they're one of the few teams that can exist outside of conference. They were in the Big East for all those years. I feel like they should just start rebranding as the new U. Like, be like, hey, our brand's cooler than the SEC brand, and I believe that. I think they're really cool. I think their talent's awesome. I think their coaching is it's there. I think that it's funny. Like, that's kind of what I was getting at. Is like you said they haven't had a home loss since 23.
Yeah, didn't have a home loss last year.
Yeah, like the losses are so loud, like the Haynes King thing or the Georgia Tech thing where it's like, oh, we don't have a kneel down in our playbook or whatever. But quietly, this environment's been really hard to win in. Now, again, not a great home field environment, not a bunch of fans, but at some point you start to get there when you keep winning. So I'm really impressed by what Miami has done, even if the losses have been loud.
Yeah, and with Louisville being unranked, I wonder if that just, for whatever reason, the team that's just had to get up for all of these games, maybe it's just not, the juice just isn't quite there. So I'm going to say 13.5 plus 13.5 feels realistic for Louisville. Maybe. And maybe I'm going to look like an idiot because Miami's clearly one of the best teams in college football. So fade of the week. All right, let's kick it to Jesse. We hit on a lot of midseason stuff. Yes, we are at the midway point of the season. I didn't want to lead the pod with that, but it is a good time to be able to look at least some midway regular season storylines, a lot of coaching trends. We talk a lot about the carousel, a lot about national awards, who could be at the forefront of that. So here is Jesse Simonton.
For those of you who are not watching Saturday Down South podcast on YouTube and just are audio only, now would be a good time to go on YouTube and subscribe to Saturday Down South because we have all of our episodes are uploaded in full. If you like watching our individual game breakdowns, you're like, hey, you know what? 2-hour pod, that's really not for me. I really just kind of want to hear about my own team. That's fine. Saturday Down South on YouTube. We're going to have all of those matchup breakdowns. We do every single power conference game. We preview, we recap. That involve the SEC. So we have so much content right now on Saturday Down South on YouTube. We have YouTube exclusive videos, and sometimes we'll do interviews that are just on Saturday Down South on YouTube. So definitely go subscribe. Please do that right now.
Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Jesse Simonton. Jesse writes for the Surrender Cobra newsletter on Substack. It is free. You should subscribe. A lot of great storylines that you're going to be able to dig through the rest of the season as well. You've been very, very busy the first part of the season. We love promoting free college football content as we do at Saturday Down South as well. Jesse, we're talking midseason storylines today. So let's start with a meta question for you. Who is the most Surrender Cobra team in college football right now? Because all the talk about these firings that have happened so far, at least those fan bases have a feeling of optimism of, well, it's about to get better. We're about to make a big name hire. And you're in kind of this interesting little phase. In my opinion, your newsletter should be this specific program's face on it, because I think there's an obvious candidate, obvious school right now that fits the Surrender Cobra mantra better than anybody in the sport.
Wow, you're putting me on the spot here. I love the layup. I appreciate the promotion. It's a good cross promotion. See, I'm kind of thinking as I'm permeating the thoughts in my mind in real time. I'm kind of imagining the Surrender Cobra with the Spider-Man meme where 3 teams are pointing at each other at once. Because I think you could make a pretty damn good case that Florida, Florida State, and Auburn can all be the Surrender Cobra teams. As we sit here at the midpoint season. Was that one of your 3 teams?
So it wasn't, but
wow.
there's a case, but I like where you're going with that. I like where you're going with that because I think you can't have made a firing yet. If you've already made the firing, you're not necessarily in this defeated state. Like you're waiting for your athletic director to pull the trigger. And the whole point, in my opinion, is like feeling like, oh my God, this is just a state of exasperated just apathy, and I think Wisconsin is the team.
See, to me, it's almost like you poke the badger, and you poke it with a stick, and you already realize it's dead. I'm not even sure that there's not enough fans in Camp Randall right now to actually be Surrender Cobra-ing. Whereas Florida, think about this. This is why I'll make the case for Florida first, because I think you could make a strong case for Auburn and Florida State as well, but Florida. Particularly because of kind of the rumors that have been running around with, Napier, when, not if, so to speak, that his job is going to be on the line. Think about this 2 weeks ago. Florida fans could barely even enjoy beating Texas. It's kind of the ethos of Surrender Cobra. They could barely even enjoy beating Texas because they're like, oh my God, are we going to have to keep this guy now? We don't want to keep this guy. And then 2 weeks later, you lose to A&M, where he goes for it. He completely ignores analytics and goes for it on 4th and 6 instead of punting the ball. I joked on a piece that came out Sunday. What was your favorite, 3rd and long draw call that Billy called? Because he called it 3 times, and 2 of them went for just completely negative yardage. So I think Florida right now is probably the surrender Cobra fan base program. But Scotty certainly has a case. I think that they're just dead. I think that, Florida State, when you see those stats, David Hale of ESPN, he always pulls out some great nuggets. He had one that just was a doozy on Sunday, that 46 teams, I don't know if you saw this, Connor, 46 teams have more ACC wins since September 1st a year ago than Florida State. We're talking about almost half the sport.
Oh my God. That's really depressing when you put it in perspective. Yeah, you're right. Those are all good candidates. The only reason I wanted to hammer home Wisconsin was just hearing the comments that the chancellor made. It's basically she's not interested in athletics, and hearing about what Barry Alvarez has said about you guys are spoiled, blah, blah, blah. And it's this concept that I've brought to the table a lot. And you're right. All these fan bases are kind of in it right now. College football hell is a place that you never want to be in. Of course, you never want to be in any form of hell. But to think that those schools are just circling the wagons, hoping their athletic director realizes it gets that bad to where they can pull the trigger and move on. It's not a good place to be, and all of those teams are very much in it.
The crazy thing about Wisconsin, too, is that they were such a program of stability for so long that then they took the swing to say, hey, we want better. We want to do better. That's what Penn State's doing. Penn State's saying we want different, but we also want better. Scotty did that. They made a hire that I think was pretty universally praised. Most folks thought that Luke Fickell was an excellent head coach. Now, his decision with the offensive coordinator that he paired himself with early on, I don't think him did any favors. The recruiting there has certainly been lackluster. But now you're talking about purgatory. I mean, they have just fallen down the ladder. With as chaotic as I think we think this coaching carousel is going to be this 2025 cycle, that job's going to rank fairly low, even though it's in the Big Ten. And it comes from a program that, historically was going to Rose Bowls and was winning, 9 or 10 games. And man, it's a sad, sad state of affairs. And I think, honestly, we could see, Barry Alvarez be coming back and doing, taking over. I'm not saying he's going to be on the sidelines, obviously, but I think he's going to start really pulling the strings in terms of power play in there. Because I think if and when they fire Fickell, I think McIntosh, the AD, is going to be gone as well.
Yeah, and I got into it this summer talking about the worst contracts in college football, and the fact that they just have this meeting with all of their coaches, and they basically decide, were you satisfactory or not? And if you were, you get another year added to your contract, is the most Mickey Mouse thing I've ever heard. Grow up, Wisconsin. And I have so much respect. I've been to plenty of games at Camp Randall and absolutely love that atmosphere when it's rocking. But yeah, they need to be a big boy school at a big boy time in college athletics. So Fickell could be the answer to this question. But I think it's fair to ask, with the way that this season has played out, who is the next coach that will be fired from a power conference job?
Yeah, I mean, Fickell is probably the easiest layup there, just because they could get blasted by 50 by Ohio State this weekend. Timeline-wise, though, when you add in the fact that Oregon is the very next weekend and then they have a bye, they could wait and just saddle these 2 losses with him. If Napier loses to Mississippi State at home on Saturday, he's done. There's no doubt about that. He's done. I don't know if you saw the gobbledygook. I'm sure you did. You're very well read, and you just wrote a column on SDS about. I mean, the gobbledygook coming out of Auburn with what their AD said and that crazy metaphor. Hugh can't be feeling too good. So if he loses to a Missouri team at home again, I wonder if that's another one. So, I mean, I think I joked. I think the bloodletting has begun, and now it's the dominoes are going to just start falling. So buckle up, because we're in for just, I think, a swath of these firings, and then it's how long do you wait, obviously, for a hire.
Yeah, the carousel is going to be nuts. And you just wrote about how this has potential to be shades of what we saw in 2021. What made that carousel so nuts was the big premier jobs that opened up. Would you argue the only way that this cycle ends up maybe one-upping that is if some of those same jobs open up, like a USC, if it all falls apart for Lincoln Riley, which I realize they just got a big time win against Michigan, or like Oklahoma, if it goes sideways, LSU, of course. Like, it feels like those jobs would have to open up along with Penn State for this cycle to be even crazier than 21.
Well, Florida, so in that 21 cycle, you're absolutely right. In that 21 cycle, Florida was open. So Florida is likely going to be open. Va-Tech was open. Yeah. Va-Tech's open again. Oklahoma, I think, is one that we all need to keep a real eye on. I know that it's crazy because just like Penn State, Sooners were in the top 5. You know, they were feeling much better than Penn State was. Penn State wasn't playing particularly well, even when they were winning. Oklahoma gets these wins. Suddenly, they have a huge missed opportunity, you know, losing that Red River Rock fight. Mateer, he's such kind of like a one-man band. I mean, he has to be just kind of Superman for them. Getting next to nothing from Jaden Ott, I think, has really hurt that offense. And so is he going to be able to withstand what is arguably the hardest remaining schedule the rest of the season? So if Venables, who already has a couple 6-6 seasons, there's a power vacuum in Oklahoma too. Jim Nagy is maybe, you know, it depends on who you talk to, maybe Brent Venables' boss right now because there is no AD, you know. So do you keep the general manager and say, hey, we're going to bring back Mateer, we're going to bring back Ben Arbuckle, and then come in and hire a head coach? That would not surprise me if Oklahoma ends up losing, you know, 4 or 5 down the stretch. So when you add that domino, you tossed out LSU. I mean, that one is a huge wild card. Look, I think another job that was open that cycle, Connor, Notre Dame. Yeah. I don't think Notre Dame's going to be open, but there's a reason Marcus Freeman's name keeps popping up for whether it's Florida, whether it's Penn State, you know, that there's some back channeling going on with a lot of these teams. So I don't know if it'll be quite as wild or star-studded, I should say, as 2021, but I do think the domino effect this cycle is going to impact even more programs. And the reason for that, frankly, is, and this is what I kind of wrote about, in this new modern age, because of your alma mater, Indiana, folks are really thinking, and I mean like the power brokers, the ADs, the boosters, the people that are, you know, funding these hires and fires. They're looking at it now and saying, why can't we, you know, add water instant success? If Curt Cignetti can do it at literally the worst power conference football program in history, why can't we? Now, obviously, in a vacuum, Curt Cignetti is clearly a top 5 coach. He's, you know, there's a gamble there. But the macro point is that no longer are the days for the most part, are blue blood programs, the Georgias, the Clemsons, these schools going to hand their keys to a former hotshot coordinator. The Dabo Sweeney's wasn't a coordinator, but he was never a, you know, head coach, wide receivers coach. Kirby Smart, never been a head coach. They're not going to be patient enough to do that. So what does that mean? It's all these different, you know, suddenly it's like the game, you know, when you're at the ballpark and it's like the 3 hats and everybody's moving around. Where's the ball? It's everybody's going to be poaching a head coach from somebody else. So if Matt Rule leaves Nebraska is going to go, you know, hire a sitting head coach, and somebody else is going to go hire a sitting head coach. So maybe the South Floridas of the world will go for a coordinator or whatever. But if you're in a power conference school right now that's looking at a head coach, I would be stunned if they ended up hiring a coordinator.
And the interesting thing is Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning,
exactly,
coordinators. They're coordinators, and there could be a couple of those schools that swerve in this cycle and just say, you know what, if I think I can get the next Dan Lanning, I'm going to go get him. Now, the question is, of course, who is that? Well, we can get into that in some of the rising coordinators who may be, you know, ticketed for bigger and better jobs very, very soon. But you're right. You talk to, like, when you throw out some of these coordinators for these jobs, the fan reaction is just, we want a proven head coach. And I get it. I totally get it. But also, if you had told anyone, this is what Dan Lanning's going to become, this is what Kirby Smart's going to become, those are the top 0, you know, 0.0001%, whatever. But there is something to be said for that. I'd be fascinated to know who is willing to take a chance like that, because it seems like you're exactly right. I think athletic directors are trending in the other direction.
I mean, it's especially, and then you add in the fact that like a guy like John Sumrall is probably going to be ready to level up this cycle. And so he is now at the front of the line instead of a Glenn Schumann at Georgia. You know, it's funny. Georgia fans want to get rid of Glenn Schumann now. Now it looks like, you know, and you know, I'm tongue in cheek there, but it's just, you know, the defense, the way they've performed in the first half of some of these games. He's a guy that's been linked to a ton of jobs in the last several years, SEC jobs, ACC jobs, the likes. I'd be skeptical if he gets a Power 4 job this cycle. Buster Falk, you know, at Georgia Tech, awesome offensive coordinator. I think a lot of schools could do way worse than Buster Falk. I joked in the preseason, one of my bold predictions was that he's going to become the next head coach at Va Tech. I don't think Va Tech's going to go that route. I think Va Tech feels like they need, again, stability, and they want someone that can come in and win now. And so these programs, I just don't think these ADs, they just don't want to be patient enough to kind of wait on the training wheels. And, you know, I mean, you mentioned a couple great ones right there, Lanning and obviously Kirby being at the top of the sport. They maybe are the outliers, I think, in kind of this modern era now where ADs are going to, you know, look and link.
A lot of talk about the coaches that are in trouble. Should also talk about the coaches that have done a whale of a job so far this season. The National Coach of the Year awards are basically impossible to repeat in. Like, I looked back at the major ones, AP, Eddie Robinson, Home Depot, AFCA. Nobody has ever gone back-to-back, ever, in the history of those awards. I think Curt Cignetti is about to become the first coach to ever do that if IU makes it back to the playoff. Any pushback whatsoever on that?
Zero. I didn't know that's a good nugget. I know that like Saban only won it like once or twice, you know, which is kind of crazy. You know,
like you can win it multiple times, but you're basically just like ruled out if you won it the year before. It's like impossible it takes this exact situation to repeat.
It would be. I mean, I guess you know, Ryan Day with kind of Ryan Day would be the only one that I would say would rival Curt thus far for that job. And what Cignetti has done is truly remarkable. You know, they just play with such flawless execution. Obviously, they've infused that talent there with the offensive and defensive lines, the transfers they brought in. Day does deserve credit, I think, for the fact that, you know, they lost so many stars on defense, and then he makes 2 coordinator hires that seem to be working out just fine. Whether he's still calling the plays or Hartline is, I don't know. But, you know, Matt Patricia, I think, has been a real surprise to a lot of folks, myself included, who, you know, thought that losing Jim Knowles was going to be kind of a big blow. And now, I mean, I had a piece on Sunday that obviously I think the competition right now is more watered down offensively than it was in 2021. But their stats, Ohio State's defensive stats, are kind of rivaling Georgia's. Which was, you know, an all-time historic unit. So Day would probably be 1B, but I think it's got to go to Curt.
Yeah, Clark Lee at Vandy, you know, if Vandy makes the playoff or something like that. Like Joey McGuire at Texas Tech, Brent Key at Georgia Tech, Mike Elko at A&M, Lane at Ole Miss, and then Kalen DeBoer at Bama post week 1. I know that's not going to be a popular opinion, but like if they go 12-1, and if they win the SEC after just such a disastrous start, like I think he would be worthy of that type of consideration. But it could end up just being Cignetti or the field. I mean, like that's
Joey McGuire would just give it to Cody Campbell,
right?
He would just write it off to Cody Campbell.
Cody Campbell comes out with a commercial, basically accepting the award on Joey McGuire's behalf.
Exactly.
You talk about the Broyles Award. I think midseason, if I had a vote, it's going to Matt Patricia. Like I would hand it to him today, and I would have no problem with that. With all the turnover, I realize you have arguably the best defensive player in college football to work around, which is nice, but still so much turnover in that unit. I'd also consider Blake Baker, Buster Faulkner as well. Mike Shanahan in Indiana is another one. Who else has impressed you besides those guys, like to this point?
I think Dawson at Miami.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, you know, what he's gotten out of, you know, there was a lot of consternation in the preseason about who are the Hurricanes going to be throwing the ball to? Who are the playmakers there? They seem like they got some damn good playmakers, that freshman being at the forefront. But he's also gotten, you know, he has clearly connected well with Carson Beck. And you know, Beck looks like, I never really bought into Beck being kind of a, you know, the number 1 overall pick, but he looks like an NFL quarterback. He looks like an NFL quarterback again. And so I think Dawson, I mentioned Buster Faulkner. I think what he's done has been impressive. And this sounds weird because they lost, obviously, this past weekend. But before that, I think Will Stein is another guy that is at least going to be on the radar, in terms of not only for the Broyles, but as a guy who I think, could get some G6 head coaching consideration because of his kind of offensive prowess.
And I talked about this with Matt Hayes. Like, if you're not looking at Will Stein for one of your openings, man, like I think you're doing it wrong. Like, I think that guy deserves a seat at the table, especially after seeing the way that the Kenny Dillingham path that he was able to follow from that role as Oregon's OC. I think the midseason Heisman is always worth talking about, but take it for what it is, obviously, because just nobody has ever looked at a game that's happened in the first half of the year and said, okay, that's the guy's got the award and it's just everybody else's. So let's take this for what it is. My Heisman ballot at this point would be like Ty Simpson, Ruben Bain, Fernando Mendoza, and then with Ahmad Hardy consideration. And then Jeremiah Smith, just kind of lurking. He doesn't have the numbers just yet. He's not even top 10 in receiving. I don't think he's top 20 right now, but it has to be part of that conversation. Where would you lean right now if you were picking the midseason Heisman?
That's a good list. I'm gonna throw you out one more wild card name, but I think it has to. I will say before I do that, it's got to start with Ty. I just believe that the laser show that he's putting on with these third and fourth down throws is just remarkable. It's even the worst Heisman voters can look at a stat line and say 16 touchdowns to 1 interception is merits legitimacy and consideration, and the fact that he has that Alabama A crest on his helmet is going to help. And if the Tide keep winning, I think Ty the Theismann is probably coming, I would say. My wild card candidate, though, I like the guys you mentioned. I think Ruben Bain deserves a spot if Miami continues to play with such ferocity on defense, the rest of the season. I really like Jade Maeva at USC. He would be my wild card. They got to win, obviously. And so I think he has to win on Saturday for this to even hold water for another, 4 days, 3 days. So this could be, blow up quite quickly. But if he beats Notre Dame on the road and USC then, can continue to stack up some wins, I think he leads the nation in yards per attempt. He's up there with touchdowns too. So, the Lincoln Riley quarterback is always a semi-safe bet. And he's kind of, quietly put together a really nice season to start. So needs a big finish. But I like Maeva, up there too. Mendoza, you're absolutely right. If Indiana keeps winning and he continues to put up some nice numbers, that's almost just like a program representative there for the Heisman.
I should have included Haynes King, by the way, now that I'm saying that out loud.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. All the quarterbacks at the top, it feels like transfers with the exception of Ty Simpson. Like, Ty Simpson's just a rare breed. And, all these other guys across the sport, man, it's kind of wild to think about, like, where Fernando Mendoza was last year. Even, like, the Dante Moore thing. Like, that's a guy that had to kind of find the right home. And, it's just it's becoming more and more popular. You look at just the quarterbacks who have made it to New York, and they all seem to have handpicked their places, after figuring out kind of who they are in college football. If you're not willing to recruit a quarterback out of the portal, Dabo Swinney, it looks like you're hurting yourself. I think that's been a midseason takeaway.
But that's a great, and the point you're making is outstanding because it also just shows you how chaotic this sport can be. Flashback to literally 2 months ago, and one of the biggest preseason storylines and narratives is that, it's all these teams return these quarterbacks, or it's guys that have waited for the Arch Mannings, Cade Club. You mentioned Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier, Lenoris Sellers. These guys were all atop, these Heisman odds. Drew Aller, all these guys way up on the Heisman odds. And then by and large, I mean, Sellers has certainly had his moments, but by and large, those guys have just all stunk. And it's just, it's pretty crazy.
Speaking of LSU, there are so many teams across college football, mainly in the SEC, who are at this very interesting fork in the road, where if you tell me they're going to end up 7-5, I'll believe you. If you tell me they're going to Atlanta, I'll believe you. And LSU is maybe the prime example of that. How in the world does this regular season shake out for the Bayou Bengals?
It's a snow globe, man. I think the SEC is just it's a car wreck every week. It seems like, and your guess is as good as mine. I do not think it's going to end fortuitously. I'll say that. I do not. I see kind of a poor ending. I just think their offense is just so. It's just so static right now. It's just dead. It's just we've just seen no improvement. Bye week coming off, whatever. Yes, they gained some yards on this past weekend, but then they turned the ball over a million times. I mean, on the broadcast, Cole Kubiak and these guys were tossing out just some insane stats about Nussmeier's arm strength or lack thereof, I should say, which was just kind of eye opening. And so, at this point, it doesn't mean they can't or will or cannot improve, but there isn't a lot of evidence thus far. When you can't run the ball, it's just really tough. And then you have a quarterback, whose arm looks shot. If 20 points is your ceiling thus far in every game, it's going to be hard to win a lot of these games when you got Oklahoma, Alabama, and like these big games. Vandy this weekend where they're a 2-point dog. They're going to have to match points with Jaden Maeva. So I really like what Blake Baker's done with that defense. But LSU going from 5-1 to, I'll say 8-4, would not surprise me at all.
As someone who picked LSU to win a national championship, I feel sad saying same. Yes, would agree with that.
I picked Alabama. I'll say this. I picked Alabama to win the national championship. And that pick is obviously still alive. But I'm not sure the SEC has a national champion this season. I think they got a lot of eyes. Now, maybe they got some really good eyes, but Alabama, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Georgia, I think all those teams could make the playoff, and you could say that. And I think maybe they all will make the playoff, but I'm not sure that there's a national champion in that bunch. It really may be an Ohio State, Indiana sort of deal. TBD on Miami. Their schedule they're about to play 7 weeks in a row. That's going to be, with a couple road games to end the season. We'll see if they can handle that. But I could be wrong. But right now, it just seems like the SEC is a lot of really high quality, but I'm not sure the ceiling, is there for some of these programs in 25.
You're right. And I think that is definitely played out in the first part. And it definitely is. Well, you're looking at the two highest ranked teams from the SEC and you're realizing, well, this is an Ole Miss team that hasn't exactly been to an SEC championship and neither has A&M. So there's this, when's the shoe going to fall with those elite teams? And the fact that we've already seen these preseason contenders suffer a loss, it makes it feel like there is not that invincible juggernaut from the SEC. The only counterpoint I can come up with is this is just kind of the way the sport is now, and the best team is never going to show itself in early October. Maybe the best team last year, Ohio State, wasn't showing itself yet at this point. They had the loss to Oregon, of course, but maybe that is just going to be, hey, we're going to see these teams that are so portal reliant now develop, and by November, we're like, oh, the SEC's got like 2 or 3 teams that can win a title. There could be some of that. Or it could just be more of what we've seen already. It's going to be fascinating.
The other thing is, too, is that, and this is where I can get and you probably do as well, can get frustrated with some of the national narratives out there from, I like Joe Klatt at times, but he and others that are really leading the charge with that is just, with the SEC bias and that kind of stuff. And the misconception or the problem that a lot of folks, when they start pointing at, well, though they have that loss or they have that loss, teams take losses.
Yeah.
The idea that every team needs to go 12-0, or whatever, that doesn't happen. Even historically, that didn't happen a whole lot. That's why the Georgia a couple of years ago that went 15-0 was such an anomaly. Teams do not go undefeated very often. And so in this age of maybe, closer parity, it's not the NFL, but we are having more parity. You're going to see teams take more losses. Ohio State lost twice last season, and they were by far the best team in the country by the end of the year. So, having a couple L's next to your ledger doesn't kill you in terms of your national champion hopes, if I'm playing my, devil's advocate with myself here.
Agreed with you on that. Last one for you. You are a Florida grad. You covered Florida. You obviously have kept in touch with that program and all of its developings. And so I'm going to put you in Scott Strickland's shoes, or at least the AD's shoes. Let's not assume Scott Strickland's got a job in perpetuity. But if you're the AD at Florida, Who's that call that you're making to?
I think that Florida will have lots of good candidates interested in this program because Billy has stacked the roster. So if you can convince these 5-star freshman receivers to stick around, some of the defensive line talent, so it's a win now job, and so I think you need a win now coach, and so I think you have to call Curt Cignetti first. Now, some Florida fans will be like, oh, we want Lane Kiffin. We want somewhere here for the long haul. I don't know if Lane would be here for the long haul, but Lane would be on that list. But I think Curt Cignetti has to be, the number one choice. Now, if he says no, which again, in a vacuum would be crazy to tell anyone if they just woke up from a coma, that the coach from Indiana would say no to, whether it's Penn State or Florida. But I think that's a real possibility. I think that, he's already making close to $9 million. He's got a ton of investment in Bloomington. And the expectations, even though what he's doing right now will never be as crazy or, as pressure filled as they would be in Gainesville. So if Curt Cignetti says no, then I think that you're having a kind of an interesting conversation, because do you go to Lane? Lane's been very successful at Ole Miss. But again, the ceiling has kind of been capped on his ability to kind of win some of the bigger games. He could win a huge one on Saturday against Georgia. But can he, is he interested in kind of taking Florida to the next step? I think a Marcus Freeman is a guy that, would certainly be on that list. And one more name to toss out there, I think Eli. I think Drink. Florida wants to score points. There's, lots of folks immediately pointed to James Franklin. Oh, Florida would do awesome. I think Florida could do a lot worse than James Franklin. And you can make the case, I think even say it with a straight face, that James Franklin could ultimately be whoever, if he goes to North Carolina or Maryland or wherever this offseason, potentially, he could end up being the best hire of the 2025 cycle. I'm not making that case, but I think you could write a column and make that argument because of his floor and success. But James Franklin doesn't score points, and so I don't think Florida fans,
unless Joe Moorhead is his offensive coordinator. Yeah, you're right.
And Akron could be open, so that he maybe that reunion happens. So I would, you got to call Curt first. I think Curt Cignetti's got to be the number one guy for any job this cycle. I don't know how you feel as an Indiana grad. I can spin it back to you, but I think he would have to be call A for every job, whether it's Penn State, Florida, whoever. And then if he says no, that's when you go down your list a little.
And the irony for anybody, for any sort of pushback of hiring Curt Cignetti for an SEC job like Florida would be, well, he doesn't have roots here. He doesn't have the Southeastern roots. He doesn't have experience. But he was placed in Bloomington, Indiana, where football is such an afterthought, and to have the success that he's had there in 2 years, truly rebuilding the culture, not just, he could benefited from that schedule. If they were looking at 7-5 this year, like, we wouldn't be having these conversations. But I think people saw the physicality that Indiana had on Saturday in Eugene and thought, oh my God, that'll play anywhere. And that to me is the best possible thing you can say about it. And look, I've accepted the fact that even though I want good things to happen for my school, he's going to get pursued. And it'd be crazy if he weren't pursued. It'd be crazy if he wasn't considering these jobs at 64 years old, knowing you might not have that many cracks at a national championship apple. And you can tell yourself, we've spent $11 million on these assistants. We've gotten this talent in the door. We're spending more on football. But if those jobs are open, you're never going to have to even have those conversations to debate it. So I agree with you 100%. He would probably have to be a first choice for any premier job that opens up.
Yeah. And his age at a school like Florida, there would be some pushback from some fans because they'd say, he's 64. I know what he's doing in Indiana is awesome. But, we've been cycling through these coaches, since Urban left. Do we really want to only have a coach here for, 4 or 5 years? And to that, I would say, if Curt Cignetti comes to Florida and wins an SEC championship and has you in the playoff in 4 or 5 years, he's leaving the program a hell of a lot better than he found it, and you'd be just fine and be able to hire the next Curt Cignetti or whoever is the hot guy if he retires, at 70, whenever. So don't worry about that problem. You would gladly take that issue.
Maybe you could just coach until he's 85 for all.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a septuagenarian, coaching in Chapel Hill still, you can last as long as you want.
Yeah, dude's in his mid-60s, lighting up officials like he's 28. So who knows, man? Jesse, really appreciate the time. Everybody go subscribe. Surrender Cobra. The newsletter is on Substack. It is free. It is great college football content. You break down all of it. Really, really appreciate it. We'll do it again soon, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Connor.
All right, well, let's close with some lad of the week. Who you got?
So this one felt pretty easy for me from a national standpoint. It is your alma mater's head coach, Indiana's Curt Cignetti. He is a guy, and we've kind of talked about what lad of the week means over the years, and I think it's doing things your way and not being kind of affected by outside pressure. And he is a guy that has turned, these unheralded players, specifically in his linebacking core, into just absolute dogs. I think it's been really cool to see what he's done with Indiana talent. They've been seen as a team that was built to beat inferior teams and kind of survive and keep it close with bigger teams. Well, on Saturday, they took it to a bigger team that had all the 5-star recruits and all the resources we always talk about. And I think that, from my mind as a college football fan, maybe I am a little bit more, I don't know, like benevolent when it comes to my fanship, but I hope guys like this stay where they're at. I hope that Indiana can, pull some of maybe their basketball revenue and keep him around, get an NIL going.
They're spending. They're spending on him.
So, I hope he can stay there. I mean, they're competing in the Big Ten. It's not like a little, pat you on the head. It's like, no, this is one of the premier teams, hard to put them over Ohio State at this point, but I'd say that they're second, right, in the Big Ten, which is, as a fan or as an alum, again, something you never thought would be possible. So, yeah, I think, doing things like his way, running his system. Yeah, sometimes when he loses, the whole, all the quotes can get bent out of shape. But when you talk to people who are great, they gaslight themselves. They do it. They live in a world that is not reality, because reality says you're not good enough and your talent's not good enough and you should never compete with an Oregon. And so he has to create a reality every day. And as a program builder, that's the dream, right? And it's like, again, we love Dan Lanning, but the situation that Dan Lanning walks into after Mario Cristobal with all the Phil Knight money is so much more desirable than what Cignetti had to build in Indiana, being part of that, early Nick Saban coaching tree, being at IUP, Elon, James Madison, kind of taking the non-traditional route. And he's turned his teams kind of into powers everywhere he's been. So who's to say you can't do it at a higher level or turn Indiana into that higher level now that they got some eyeballs on him?
It's interesting hearing Saban talk about him too, and how I think it even surprises Saban that he's doing what he's doing. I just don't think that Saban had him pegged as one of the guys. Obviously, he's had a million of those guys on his staff, and he can usually figure out this Kirby Smart cat is going to end up pretty well for him. He's going to be just fine when he wants to become a head coach. And I just don't think that Cignetti was ever looked at in that sort of way. And because of the point you just brought up, like taking the non-traditional path to get to this point, and it took a while. It just kind of does when you ultimately opt for that. But it is so unique. It is something that even in this moment, I don't feel like I have a full appreciation for. And it might, this is going to sound bad, it might take him leaving for another one of these bigger jobs, maybe a Penn State, maybe a Florida. It might take that type of situation for me to fully process just how insane this is. In 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I will have a deeper appreciation for the work that he has done in this 2-year window, which, if that's all it ends up being, it's a 2-year window that I can tell you for a fact Indiana fans never, ever, ever dreamed that they would get, ever. And it's skewing everything for so many of these vacancies. And it's truly hard to process how quick this turnaround has existed. And it doesn't necessarily have to fade away if they come up short of a national championship or something like that. And there's even still a part of me that's like, hey, if they get to a Big Ten championship, let's remember that a lot of kind of disappointing Wisconsin teams still were able to get to a Big Ten championship at one point. So take that for what it is.
That was divisions though, right? It's
True.
A little bit different.
Pre 18 team conference. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get it from that standpoint, but man, it's wild. It's wild. I have so many people reaching out to me man, the Cignetti thing, he's a heck of a coach, right? People are reaching out to me man, I feel like my coach sucks and I wish I had your head coach. I've never gotten that. Buddy, I covered Bill Lynch. Okay. This is a very, very different time. And I'm happy for the people that have invested. And that's the thing too, is they're spending $11 million on their assistant pool right now. which is a ton of money. He's making over $8 million a year. So yeah, he might end up leaving for another job, but they've at least not made it so inevitable. And that's, I think, kind of cool to consider. I don't know what he wants, and maybe he will end up wanting those bigger jobs, but live in the moment. A lot of Indiana fans very much living in the moment right now.
His amount of conference championships and appearances, division champion, is so crazy because it's all these different conferences where he's just showed up and put belt to butt. And yeah, I mean, and just to put a bow on that, I don't want to take this back to James Franklin, but you can't help
it. Was related.
But it's related because
related.
If you're James, if you're Penn State admin and you're going, we're spending all this money, we're putting all this faith in this guy, and yet Indiana passed us. We couldn't beat Oregon in these big moments, and at the end of the game, our guy did this, and his guy came through. And with that talent, we got to change something. So I think that really, when you're changing the game, we talked about who was it? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar got dunking outlawed because they were like, this is unfair. Yeah. When you do something that's so significant that it shapes other people, that's where you're an influencer.
If Penn State would rather have Matt Rule than Curt Cignetti, Penn State gets whatever follows. I'll say that.
Have the season you deserve.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go with another homer pick here. Although 2 homer picks were lad of the week, and only one of them was mine. I'll go with Jake Moody, the Bears kicker who delivered a walk-off field goal on Monday night. I was talking at Lauren about this. First time my heart has been pounding for one of my football teams in a very long time. And again, I say with full context, I am an Indiana graduate. I don't consider myself a diehard Indiana football fan. It doesn't get my blood going in the way that a Bears game does. And I realize those were Washington in the regular season is a little bit different than at Oregon. So that's why this is not even a conversation of who I truly root for. But man, the Bears needed that. They needed that so badly. And to win on Monday Night Football with the type of game that they just always lose, always lose, fully expected more of the Jaden Caleb crap thrown at the Bears. And I want to have to live in that world once again. And I realize Jaden has been clearly the superior player. I will not sit here and tell you that Caleb has been better or anything like that. But just for a night to have Jaden be the one that fumbled and give the Bears life. And then Moody comes in with the game winner when it's rainy and windy and just crappy conditions. He was 4 for 5 and hit one that was blocked on a kick that probably would have missed anyways when they needed all of it. This is someone who was a 3rd-round pick 2 years ago out of Michigan. He was picked 78 picks before Puka Nacua.
Okay, well, you put in that context. I don't know if that was the best pick. Hold on.
Probably not. 49ers would rather have Puka Nacua in hindsight. But yeah, they cut him after the season opener. He had two bad missed kicks and then had a rough ending to his year 2 last year. And the Bears picked him up a month ago. He's chilling on the practice squad. Didn't even know he was going to be playing until Monday morning. Carlos Santos working through a quad injury. And they're like, hey, get out there on Monday night and make a bunch of kicks for us and have us not be the laughing stock of the NFL. Carried off the field. I mean, sports are great. Sports are great.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say this too, man. As a guy who's a fan, we talked about teams are going to play. I like Rattler a lot, to be honest. I want to see where it goes.
I do too.
But I'm of the opinion that if you could spend a first overall pick to get you a quarterback that isn't holding you back, that's good enough. I think if you're the Bears and you really haven't had that guy, I wouldn't compare him to Jaden Daniels. I would just say we spent this resource to have a guy who is not going to cost us games and be a liability. I don't think Caleb's exactly been that. I think he's got some growing pains, as all young quarterbacks do, especially with the old staff. But I think there's a lot to like about this Bears team. I'm not saying get your hopes super up or anything, but I think that they at least have the pieces, and it seems like they're finally moving in a direction that people can get behind. And it's got to be an exciting time to believe in these young guys, Dunze, who are a friend of the pod, and Caleb Williams and that guy. So Swift balling out there.
DeAndre Swift looked like 2019 Georgia DeAndre Swift, man. Whew. I used to tell people all the time before he dealt with all those injuries and stuff like that, which really I think plagued him. Even I remember the day that I spent with Justin Jefferson at IMG, DeAndre Swift was banged up and he was working out. And I was like, dang, it's kind of a bummer to see him not at his peak just because of what he's endured. And he's kind of been considered damaged goods in the NFL. He looked so good. That offensive line was creating some holes for him, but man, DeAndre Swift was so freaking good. And I always feel compelled because I deal with a lot of Bears fans who just crap on DeAndre Swift. I'm like, you guys don't understand. This cat, when he put his foot in the dirt, was so special at Georgia, and injuries have definitely caught up to him. But that's another guy I could have very easily picked him for lad of the week too.
For sure. So, a much more hopeful time in your football team's life as far as the Bears. And, we have 2 disappointing quarterbacks on our team.
I know what you're doing.
If you want to send Caleb Williams this way, we'll do it. But yeah, again, great week for the Bears, man.
I know what you're doing here because our teams face each other on Sunday, and we're gonna actually be recording probably during the first part of that game. And I know what you're doing here. You're just building me up, and all of a sudden the 1-5 Saints are gonna come into Chicago. Spencer Rattler's gonna get his second win as a starter. I'm gonna feel really dumb. It's gonna be a Dennis Allen revenge game for you personally.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
The night on Monday.
One of my buddies texted me the other day. He was like, well, we could have had Jalen Carter. I was like, yeah, Jalen Carter would have punched Dennis Allen in the face. Dude. I can tell you exactly how that would have gone because anyway, that's a guy that is sore replacing Saints fans. But yeah, I'm not too fired up about the Saints right now. There's no bit here. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, I hope it's not. If we're being 100% honest, I really
That's the thing. It shouldn't be, but every NFL game is close now. So
yeah. And by the way, nobody cares about this at all whatsoever. But let's just say Lauren has lost a fantasy matchup for the first time since 2023, and it was because of someone in this household. And Claire doesn't have a fantasy team yet, so we're just.
Oh my gosh, this is massive. Did you have Bears players?
I did not have one. No, I didn't.
Oh, dude, I have so many Bears players. I haven't even told you this. I've started to make the joke during the Dabble read. I have Adunze. I have Swift. I had somebody else. I think one of the tight ends that I cut. But yeah, it's a sneaky offense.
It is a sneaky offense. Yeah, she had Puka get hurt. I won by 15, but she had Puka get hurt. And
well. Jake Moody revenge. Look at this.
Yeah, exactly. But I just needed the world to know that because I can't really talk about that at home very much without getting scowls and death stares and whatnot. I sent a message in the group chat that did not end well for me, but I gas her up. Whatever. Lauren was 5-0 in a 14-team league, having won the league title, undefeated last year.
14-team league. She hasn't lost this. Goodness, man.
It was a 10-team league last year. We expanded to 14 this year, but last year she was 16-0. 16-0 in our fantasy league, which is never, ever, 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 ever happens for her third title in 5 years. And
that's a dynasty.
And that's why I tell her all the time. And she was 5-0 to start off this year. And then little 1-4 Connor strolls in.
Steven Garcia, man. You're living the dream.
Very much. I'll take that comp. Whatever. We don't need anything else associated with that. 2010 Steven Garcia. All right. That's a pod. Week 8 is going to be great. It's going to be absolutely awesome. Cannot wait for it. Please, please, please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SCS Pod, at Set Down South, at CJ Rivera, at Chris Hart. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.